Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Boulder County Commissioners Board Workshop for June 21st, 2022. Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present, and if you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Flores, before we get started, do you have any opening remarks?
Just a wide variety of topics for board update and discussion today. So I understand we'll take one item out of order.
Yes, sir. We're going to go ahead and address the abandoned and derelict vessels first so we can get our friends at law enforcement back on the road. And we're going to bring, good morning. How are you, Ms. Powell?
Morning, sir. Okay, I'm just going to give a brief overview and the background of the Abandoned Derelict Vessel Program, the laws and legislation that govern it, and then we'll have law enforcement come up and speak to their process, as well as WCIND, and then I will come back and go over what our county process is.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tina Powell, Parks and Natural Resources. The abandoned and derelict vessel, abandoned property in the case of vessels is defined in Florida Statute 705 as tangible personal property that does not have an owner and does not, is partially dismantled and does not have any apparent intrinsic value. Derelict vessels themselves are further defined in Florida Statute 823, and those are vessels that are left, stored, or abandoned in junk-like conditions, dismantled at a port or beached on private property without consent. Abandoned derelict vessels must be defined in Florida Statute 372, which includes the description of watercraft. In 2006, FWC defined an additional category of at-risk vessels to help assess vessels before they become abandoned and derelict. And in Florida Statute 327, they list a number of criteria that law enforcement can use to determine those vessels at risk prior to becoming abandoned and derelict. The abandoned derelict vessel issues are primarily governed through Florida Statutes 327, 705, and 823, which define them, establish a procedure, and then provides for removal and penalties. And we also have a local ordinance, 3-9-76.1, that allows the county to assist in this process and maintain compliance with state law. The enforcement of abandoned derelict vessels within Charlotte County is primarily done through Florida Fish and Wildlife Law Enforcement, Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, and City of Punta Gorda Police Department within the city. So first we'll have FWC law enforcement come up and speak to their process. Captain Sonny Sushel.
Good morning. I'm Captain Lonnie Sushel with the Florida Fish and Wildlife, currently working directly with Boating Waterways as a derelict vessel coordinator for all of South Ops, which includes Charlotte County. Go into why this is a new position, and I'll explain why we are aggressively going after derelict vessels more now than we have in the past. And it starts off with budget. I'm sure you guys all would like to know what the budget is for derelict vessels for the upcoming year. And this year, Governor DeSantis gave $8 million for grant removal of derelict vessels, which is where any one of the law enforcement agencies investigate the derelict vessel to its completion and then turn over a letter of authorization for it to be removed. And then the city or county applies for a grant, and that's where they get their funding from, is that $8 million. It is 100% reimbursed, so the county's really not paying for anything. It's all coming out of that grant funding. So, and we have already started taking the applications. We started June 1st to get the process because it is a process. And that way, as soon as July 1 hits, we can start pulling those vessels out. So we're pretty much went ahead and got in a month in advance getting that process rolling. Additionally, we have from the American Recovery Project grant $30 million from the federal government. And this is going to do something we haven't really done too much in the past, which is do a lot more direct removals through our agency, where we're not relying on the counties or the cities to put in grant applications and stuff like that. We're just going to put removal projects together ourselves. This money is also going to be used for a new program that we are in rulemaking right now, which is the vessel turn-in program. And I'll go into what the vessel turn-in program is a little bit farther down the slides. And also into a new status called public nuisance vessels, which relates back to at-risk vessels. So I'll break all that down. Some of it's going to be a little bit repetitive from Tina's portion, but it'll make sense as we bring it all together. All right. At-risk vessel is a vessel that is upon the waters of the state in a wrecked, junked, or substantially dismantled condition. An at-risk vessel is a vessel that exhibits conditions indicating that the vessel may become derelict. And that's where we get into the breakdown of those qualifications for that we can write citations for. For the new part, the public nuisance vessel is at-risk vessels with 3 or more convictions of the same at-risk violation within an 18-month period. And we have to have adjudication on those other than anything other than acquittal or dismissal qualifies that vessel to move forward in the process. All right, so like I said, at-risk vessels have one of the following conditions. It can be taking on water without being able to dewater itself. Spaces on the vessel are open to the elements without the ability to be closed or for an extended period of time. The vessel is broken loose or is in danger of breaking loose. I'm sure we've seen that quite often where the anchored vessel breaks loose and ends up on a sandbar. Well, that's that at risk, and most of the times those end up becoming a derelict vessel once they hit a ground. So we're trying to take steps to get ahead of that. The vessel is listing due to water intrusion, and the vessel does not have an effective means of propulsion. Effective means of propulsion is a little bit more in depth when it comes to that risk because there is a process to prove that it doesn't have an effective means of propulsion. These are the rule requirements. We have to notify the owner of the vessel through any one of these methods, either in person, by telephone, or on a telephone recorded by body cam, written notice. If they have a fax machine, I'm sure they probably don't, but we could fax them the notice, electronic mail, and any other electronic means. Vessels 16 foot or less are exempt from this portion. They have 30 days for repairs after proof. So if they come to you and us and say, hey, I know it doesn't have the effective means of propulsion right now, but here's my proof, like receipts from West Marine or invoice notices that they've ordered parts to try to get that boat up into compliance. We've got to give them 30 days and then check back up on them with it. And there is a test, it's an evaluation, and it can't be done during small craft advisory. And for the sailboat evaluations, there's got to be a minimum of 5 knots of wind. And we have to wait 30 days between the retesting, because if we write a citation, we have to give 30 days by statute to retest and reevaluate so that we could cite that individual again if need be. And the owner can have an acting agent perform evaluations in their absence. And there's a timekeeping component to this, one being the 72 hours, but also in the actual evaluation test itself. And then one of the things with the EMP test, it could trigger a live aboard definition if the vessel is actually lived on. So there's other protections that they have with that. So at risk to public nuisance. The reason why there's the 30 days in between is because our fines for the at risk graduate up. So the first offense is $100. This was actually just bumped up within this last year. It used to be $50 to start out, then it went to $100, then it went to $250. Well, that wasn't getting enough traction, so we got it approved to bump up the fine amount. So we're bumped it up to $100 for the first, 30 days after, bump it up to $250, third, it goes to $500. So then this will lead to our public nuisance. So if a vessel that is subject of 3 or more violations issued pursuant to the same paragraph in that breakdown, the possibility of breaking loose, all those other ones, within the 18-month period, which result in dispositions other than acquittal or dismissal, shall be declared a public nuisance and subject to 705 and 823.11, which is the derelict vessel. The commission, an officer of the commission, or a law enforcement agency or officer specified in 32770 may relocate, remove, or cause to be relocated or remove such public nuisance vessels from the waters of the state. So that just defines, just like the derelict vessel, that once we've done our due process, prove that this vessel is a public nuisance, it will then flow into the same process or a similar process as derelict vessel, where we have to give a notification of rights and say, look, we've declared this a public nuisance. We're moving forward with removing your property. So we'll break down derelict vessel. A vessel that is wrecked, junked, or substantially dismantled condition upon any waters of the state. A vessel is wrecked if it is sunken or sinking aground without the ability to extricate itself absent a mechanical assistance, or remaining after a marine casualty, including but not limited to a boating accident, extreme weather, or fire, or hurricanes. A vessel is junked if it has been substantially stripped of vessel components, if vessel components have substantially degraded or been destroyed, or if the vessel has been discarded by the owner or operator. And attaching an outboard motor to a vessel that is otherwise junked will not cause the vessel to no longer be junked if such motor is not an effective means of propulsion as required by the at-risk laws. A vessel is substantially dismantled if at least 2 of the 3 following systems and components are missing, compromised, incomplete, inoperable, or broken: the steering system, the propulsion system, or the exterior of the hull integrity. And what we're looking at there is fiberglass broken right near the water line, where at any moment with taking on water and that breakage in the hull, it could cause it to be sunken. Any questions so far? I know I'm flying through a lot of information.
Yeah, I did have one. Go ahead.
I have a couple.
Okay.
Thank you for coming, appreciate it.
Welcome.
Is there any differentiation in how we react toward a documented vessel as opposed to a vessel that's state registered?
No, we do the
Okay,
same process.
the same rules and standards apply. Okay, and is there any differentiation if the vessel is on state, county, government property as opposed to being on private property?
As far as if it was tied off to a dock?
Well, if it's gonna meet the definition of being a derelict vessel as you outlined.
Yes. So the only time where it would become an issue is when it comes to, so the process of handling that as a derelict vessel is the same. The only difference is in the funding of the removal. So if it's on somebody's private property and they allow their vessel to become derelict and we charge them and write them, we're not going to fund to remove that boat for them. They are going to have to take care of their own derelict vessel to get it removed, and we're just going to keep charging them until it's taken care of.
Okay. And as I understand it from my experience, there were a couple different categories, and a derelict vessel is a vessel, obviously, as you've defined, but there are also other vessels that we have to deal with that may not be, quote, defined as derelict, and that would be that if there was a vessel that appeared to be an environmental problem, whether it's leaking fuel and or in an environmentally sensitive area, that would require removal. Well, the second cause, the Coast Guard did this to me, and I've been dealing with it all my life. The second would be something that might possess to one degree or another, either minimal or extended, a hazard or potential aid to navigate, problem for navigation, and or whether it's tied or fixed to a buoy, if it's in mid-channel, or, you know, and because those, and some of those may not be derelict, but they may be boats that would need attention to get them out of where they are. And as you know, and again, the third category would be none of the above that are all what we would call at risk. Yes. My frustration, having to some degree doing what you guys do now, we had to go through so many steps in terms of determining the ownership and responsibility of the vessel. And the only way we could do it before we touched all those bases was if it was an absolute emergency and you could see the fuel pouring out, or it was literally closing the channel. Has much of that changed in the last, I'm not going to talk about basic training, I'll make it a little closer, in the last 50 years since I was out doing this, you know, has much of that changed?
Yes, because we still have to go through the process and determine that it is a derelict
Ownership.
vessel, and ownership and all those steps, which I've got listed out to go through with y'all. But when it comes to whether it be an actual, like we can visibly see that there's fuel leaking and we need to take actions, yes, we're going to take actions on that. We're going to get DEP's emergency management to come out and help with the cleanup of that. If it is a navigational hazard or like it needs to be moved because it is a potential threat, if it is shown that and can be proved that, yes, it's a derelict vessel, or because most of the time it's at risk or derelict vessel, with approval through the local captain or another law enforcement, it's got to be a supervisor, the vessel can be moved for better storage and relocation. It can't be destroyed. We've done this in other places in the state. We're actually working with the city of Miami-Dade right now because they had a migrant vessel that was a similar situation. It got left, tied up, left in a navigable waterway, and there's no way to prove who left it, ownership and stuff like that, but we still got to do the process, do the due process, see if anybody wants to try to take claim of that vessel. So what we did was we actually took with permission from that county, had the vessel moved and stored in a new location where it wouldn't be a hazard to navigation to Biscayne Bay, which is where it was left, and stored it there and began, and it was an extingent circumstance, so we had to already say, look, it's going to be stored on a county dock that normally is a paid spot. So we worked it into the grant that money would be reimbursed to the city for the storage of that vessel. So in those circumstances, and it's not all the time happening, but we will work as an agency to try to do the best we can to make sure that the environment is kept the way we want, or at least not as damaged as it has been.
One final question, and as I recall, obviously less now than used to be, but some of the old marine laws, and particularly in terms of title, ownership, responsibility, are still on the books. Could you sort of share with us and I'll call it laborious process that has to be followed so we can fully understand this to determine ownership and responsibility? Would you share that with us?
Yeah, so it is, I mean, we've got to go through registration, we've got to go through title history, we've got, a lot of times the individuals in these cases, they don't update their addresses or their phone numbers and all that. So one of the things that as an agency we have done to help with that is we actually just hired a criminal intel analysis person to strictly do derelict vessel cases for us, so that because we were tying our criminal analyst up, trying to say, hey, we need clear reports ran on this person, we need to track it, doing social media if they have it, any phone numbers, all that stuff that we've tied our names to, and our social security numbers, all that stuff that we've tied it to. Now we have a criminal analyst to go tracking people down.
That's great, and I'm going to let you go on, but the reason, and I'll turn myself off here, the reason I wanted to detail that is because, when it's there and we get a call from the constituents and folks in the community, they want it done right away. And the reality is the process that we have to go through, it's not so much days and weeks, it's weeks and months, and sometimes, as I recall, even years. And it's part of the process which frustrates, obviously, us, our constituent, and you guys as well that have to deal with it. But that's what I think it's important that the public understand, that to some degree, unless it's a serious at-risk aid to navigation situation, our hands are tied. So if you could turn a little bit on that, thank you so much.
So yeah, and I have all that in the presentation, the whole process to go through.
We'll get to it.
So,
yeah, mine's a real simple question. Under 68D, the exemption for vessels that are 16 feet or less, is that an exemption of the process, or like you can take it right away, or is it they're just totally exempt from being.
That's from the effective means of propulsion test that they're exempt
I
because.
just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so the derelict vessel process, and it's long and strenuous process for us, which I'll go a little bit further in advance, but as the agency, like I said, we've put me in place down here to be able to come and do this and work hand in hand with our local law enforcement and with the counties and the cities, because we want to streamline it as much as we can too, while still staying within our legal abilities and making sure that their liability doesn't fall on the city, county, or the officers who are actually investigating the cases. That's why the process is because of the liability of possibly taking somebody's property and destroying it. So we need to do our due process and determine stuff. So how it begins, the investigating member will conduct an assessment to determine the vessel's status as a derelict vessel or if it's at risk, but we're going to go derelict vessel. So then the member is going to document with photos, GPS coordinates, the description of the area, talking about if there's mangrove damage, seagrass damage, which we get a lot of that in the Keys with the coral and stuff like that. We're always having that issue. And we need to document that for possible other charges towards that individual for the derelict vessel. So the officer's going to go ahead and start putting the information into the DV database. They're going to develop their probable cause narrative describing why it is derelict with a simple statement, a statement as simple as the vessel is derelict on the waters of the state because it is wrecked. It is wrecked because it is hard aground without the ability to extricate itself and dewater. So once we have that, then the member has to try to find that responsible party. And this is the part that can take a little bit of time. But what we've been able to do is get it into statute that now if we send restricted certified mail to the last known address, we've attempted and started that process of notification. So we would rather be able to do it in person because we'd like to be able to give them that notice of rights to fix their vessel and their ability to contest it, and that's why we have the 21-day wait, which is we'll get into. So a notification of rights packet is delivered, and like I said, it's a certified mail. Or even if we talk to them on the telephone and get stuff and say, hey, we need to meet up with you, get that notification of rights package to them. They sign it. We also are citing. We are as our policy as FWC. We have said for our officers that they shall cite the individual. If they find a responsible party, they will cite them. It's no longer, hey, we're going to work with you. It's, you've let this boat get to a derelict condition. You're getting cited for it. You'll have your opportunity to contest it in court, but you also, and you have your ability to contest us determining your vessel derelict. So, like I said, in person is preferred when we can. After the notification of rights has been provided, the vessel can be posted with our derelict vessel sticker, and that's when the 21-day count begins. Once we've posted it, after giving notification of rights, then the 21-day begins. If they do not contest it in the 21 days, they haven't requested an administrative hearing for the to say that their vessel is not derelict, or even say or prove that they aren't the responsible party and they have somebody else that they can show bills of sale and stuff like that to prove that they're not responsible for that vessel anymore. Then we provide a removal authorization letter that can be sent to the county, the cities, or FW's Boating and Waterways section, and that's when we begin to move forward with the removal process. If the county has sent the letter, they move forward with removal through county funds or applying for grant funding through FWC's Boating and Waterways section, which right now this is the fastest process, and that's why there's a lot of money put at it, because a lot of the counties already have their determined contractors that they use all the time. So it's pretty much, they go out, they look at it, they say this is how much it's going to cost, they get an estimate together, they apply for the grant, and then it moves forward through that process. Right now, which we're in the process of fixing, if the letter is sent to FWC for direct removal, and this is where it takes longer, is because we have to do an invitation to bid and put it out on My Florida Marketplace under the vendor information portal. Well, they've got people who have 30 days to go and look at it and say, yeah, I'll take that job. And then there's a whole process of, the bidding war and all that. And that can take up to 60 to 90 days. Whereas with the local counties and cities can usually move a little bit faster on the removal. All right, so within the boating waterways section, we review all the DV cases, whether it's being for grant funds or direct removals, and we do this to ensure that due process was provided to all responsible parties and parties with interest in the vessel. There could be lien holders that had a lien on that vessel, but the other person let it go derelict. We have to give those lien holders the right to, if they want the boat, and to take care of it. They wouldn't be charged as a lien holder. The responsible party for the person who wouldn't let it go derelict would be the one charged. All right, so then after we've got all the due process, the boat's been removed. One of the things we're doing now as well is the investigating officer are sending a demand of a repayment letter for the cost of removing the DV. So not only are we charging them criminally, we're still putting a demand for a repayment letter on them. And what we were able to do is get it that if they don't pay back within 30 days or they don't work out a settlement agreement or anything like that, and we're not hearing from them and they're ghosting us, leaving us with an $8,000 bill for their vessel that we had to remove, we're getting with DHS&B to suspend all future registrations of vessels and vehicles for the owner and responsible parties. And this has caused a lot of repayments. People, no longer able to register your vessel or your vehicle. You got your driver's license, we'll let DHS&B and FHP take that from you, but we're not gonna let you have a vessel or a vehicle in the state of Florida anymore. That really fires them up to, I need to get with them and try to fix this issue. And we've seen a lot of success with that. So we went over that. All right, so additions to the DV program. Like I said, we're working on a vessel turn-in program. I believe we've had a couple of folks in here were on the stakeholder meeting that we had last week talking about it, and because it's still in development. We're actually, as the commission, we're presenting it to our commissioners on July 13th, I believe, at the commission meeting in Jacksonville. And this is going to be a program where to be eligible, the vessel has to be at risk. It has to be documented by a law enforcement as an at-risk vessel, whether through a warning or a citation. We want to have proof that the vessel is at risk. So they have a title showing the applicant is the titled owner of the vessel for which application is being made. They have current or expired registration number or federal documentation number or a hull identification number. The vessel must be floating. We don't want to have people turning in derelict vessels saying, oh no, it's just at risk. Well, sir, it's on the bottom and it's not at risk, it's derelict now, right? We don't want to have to be dealing with that. And it has to be located upon the waters of the state. Like I said, they have to have been the subject of a citation or a written warning from law enforcement for a violation under the at-risk statute, not be in derelict condition or be the subject of an active derelict vessel investigation by law enforcement, meaning it might be floating, but it's substantially dismantled and we've already got a derelict vessel case working on it. And if local, state, or federal regulations require mitigation efforts to remove or dispose of contaminants or materials on board the vessel other than those ordinarily aboard a vessel, the vessel will become ineligible. We don't want somebody storing, like you said, a bunch of fuel and diesel fuel and oil and stuff on a boat and just saying it's out there and then have us come and clean up the mess saying, oh no, we're turning the boat in, but they're turning it in with a bunch of hazardous materials. We're not going to let that. We're going to make that go in a different process. So what I didn't get into with the vessel turn-in program, what they'll do is they'll apply for an application. They're saying, I want to turn over my boat. I no longer have the means to try to make this boat to what it should have been. It's at risk. It's at risk of becoming a derelict vessel. I want to turn the boat over to FWC. So they'll apply for the application. If we accept it, we'll have them turn in their title for the vessel. They have to have the title, and they turn it into us as a junked title. And then we use the ARP money and we go and remove that vessel from the waters of the state there before it becomes derelict. So it's another way, and we hope that this program is going to really help out to prevent derelict vessels. And we're already working on, we've got the pamphlets ready to go out once we get it signed and put into the Florida Administrative Code. It's going to be under the 68 Delta. And we're going to do a lot of advertisement. We're trying to get posters at West Marine, and we want to do some more workshop stuff like this where we'll be able to come and present it and bring it to the public within the next couple of months. We're also working on doing FWC direct removals. We currently had a request for information or out on a vendor portal, which is where we're trying to get our own vendors, our own contractors signed up on a list in a geographical area to where we can do similar to the counties where we say, hey, we have this boat, we want you to give us an estimate, come back with it, and then we can move forward as if it was, and pretty much we'll be writing a purchase order instead of doing the whole invitation to bid and all that stuff. And those contractors are going to be utilized for the VTIP program and the public nuisance vessels, as well as direct removal projects. And that's my presentation. This is my information down here at the bottom. Any more questions?
Yes, sir, we have two in the queue. Commissioner DeSalle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You talked about the $8 million grant available for cities and counties.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know how much, I guess there's a deadline that July, was it July 1st or whatever that date was? How do you know how much to request out of the $8 million?
That's where you get the individual or the city or county, they go out and they get estimates for how much it's going to cost to remove that boat. Usually we do a estimate when we're looking at them by $500 a foot. And then we'll tack on another $5,000, and that's for a vessel 35 foot or less. We're looking at about $500.
Okay. So it's, the grant applications are open, or it's $8 million available as of June 1st, so on a case-by-case basis. So every time you have a situation where you have to apply individually for a grant in each and every instance.
You can do a whole package. So if like a county has 5 vessels that are ready to go right now, they can put that grant application in for those 5 vessels, and it'll have a breakdown of what each one's going to cost, and the total amount is what the grant is being requested.
So if we do that, and then we end up in the course of the year with 10 vessels, so there's 5 more that you didn't apply for the grant, and the grant money's dried up because everybody else has already offered it, we just use county funds at that point.
Or the investigating officers will actually, that's where we'll move into FWC direct removals using that $30 million. So we're going to try to do our best to help out once that $8 million's gone, which.
Okay, the American Recovery Project, where that $30 million comes from, is that reoccurring, or that's just a one-time lump?
That is for the next, we've got to use that money up. We have to have it spent by 2026,
I think.
and then I think it's by 2024 or 2025, sorry. It's got to be spent and encumbered by 2026.
But that's not reoccurring. I mean,
that's not reoccurring.
Right.
We're hoping that with as much hard work as we're going to be putting in for the next couple of years to use that up, that we will be able to see other funding similar to that to come.
okay, so we can't depend on that long term.
Not long term.
We're fortunate to have it now, but it's not going to be around. So we're looking at the $8 million. That grant funding, is that typically the request every year, or does it go up or down?
This year, it's the highest we've had in a long time.
So it could be less.
Last year, it was a lot less. It was about $3 million last year. So I think with the attention that derelict vessels are getting, and the public input and the seriousness of it, of the derelict vessels, there's more attention to it now, and we're hoping that this will be recurring.
So once June 1st hits and everybody sends their applications, and in your experience, is the money essentially the $3 million, did it dry up pretty quick?
No, it lasted quite a bit last
Okay.
year.
All right.
I think when it got to the fourth quarter, of the spending year, we pretty much had all the funds allocated to a spot, and we went right into doing FWC direct removals in the fourth quarter and spent up another, I think it was 2.3 million we spent in the fourth quarter.
Well, that's interesting. If 3 million seems to have been substantially getting the job done, it more than doubled.
Yeah, and I think it's because we're going to be doing a lot more removals with the ability for us to be doing direct removals ourselves, with giving the counties more money to be able to utilize it, so that the county's budgets aren't being dried up and the vessels sitting because, yeah, we've got the cases ready to go, but we don't have the money to do it. Well, now we've got the money to do it, so we're going to go and get it done.
Thank you, Commissioner Constance. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just a little too slow on the button, so Commissioner DeSeo got two of my questions out of the way. So 2026 for the 30 million, and then, so you said 3 million last year plus 2.3, so that's, we're still going to have way more to go with this 8 million. So is the idea that there's a backlog of vessels that haven't really been gotten to because they're kind of tucked in out of the way and not navigable issues, but they really need to be out of there? So, I mean, I guess I'm not that I'm unhappy, but why was so much more money put into this? Do we think there's a bigger problem out there?
That I really...
Because, I mean, if you look at, and I don't mean to cut you off, if you look at the 3 plus the 2.3, even 2.5, that's 5.5 million. Now we have 8 this year. So unless something really crazy happens, every single boat that's derelict or at risk should be out of the waters by the end of the year, and we'll have money left, which I don't even know if that'll roll over, but I would hope that it would. But that's really good. That's really good news. My other question was, are you involved with the program in Sarasota with at-risk boats? Is that the pilot program for this?
I'm not familiar with it. Is that talking about the...
Okay. I guess we're going to get that from WCIND, but I like the fact that we have the ability to get them before they're big trouble, because I think that's really what this has to be. And the good news is we have lots of boating clubs here and all through the waterways north and south of us in the other counties where those boaters are very keen. They're out there all the time. They know when there's issues. And if there's a network to be able to make the call and get these things taken care of ahead of time, it just makes everybody's work so much easier and much more effective. So appreciate all the work you've done, and it was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All my questions have been asked and answered. I just want to comment that of all the years I've been around in this, I'm in my 50th year as a resident of the state of Florida. This is the best presentation, most comprehensive presentation I've seen on this topic, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tina?
Before Deputy Nelson comes up to speak to CCSO's process, I just wanted to clarify for the $8 million in FWC funding that's available, that you have to apply when the vessel is ready to be removed. You can't apply and just have a pot of money waiting. It's an individual vessel application, or a group if we had some at one time.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Well, based on that statement, what's the turnaround on the grant application and actually getting the funding?
Anywhere between 2 weeks and a month.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking, 90 days, 100, anytime you get into those grant writing situations. But that's a incredibly quick turnaround.
In the past, it had been much longer. I'll bring up later in my presentation, we brought you all a resolution in April to help speed up our end of that process, so it'll be closer to that 2 weeks to a month in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. And just to tag on to that, I like to see you spin around.
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
No, I'm not asking a question, but I just think that it's great because it doesn't allow any one area to try to soak up all the money and sit on it. It's everybody, if you have a righteous case to bring, and everybody's, I'm assuming it's very cordial, and everybody's just sort of coming in at the time when they need the money, and therefore it works as well as it does. So I'm really happy about that. Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Deputy First Class Richard Nelson with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office Marine Patrol Division. So a lot of the stuff we went over with FWC about what a derelict vessel is, I'm going to go more into what we do with Charlotte County and how we handle the process of actually removing, investigating the vessels, and finding those owners. So first thing we do, and a lot of these pictures might be vessels you guys have possibly seen. These were cases that we did work and are closed for the most part. A lot of these vessels are no longer on our waters. So first thing we do is we're going to look at the vessel itself, see if we can find any sort of identifying markers, named vessels through U.S. Coast Guard, where we can look on the Coast Guard's website to get HIN numbers or registration information, obviously registration numbers on the vessel, and then the HIN numbers that are stamped onto the vessel itself. A lot of times, these vessels are in poor shape where the numbers have either fallen off or they've ghosted themselves, where the sun has faded the decal to the point where it's actually almost, you can see the actual registration number into the fiberglass because the sun has faded the color around it. So that's the first thing we do. After that, if it's an at-risk vessel, say that there is it's listing, there's an issue with it, we've actually, we have a sticker that we will sticker the vessel with, so that while we're trying to find the owner, if the owner is not with it when it is at risk, they know immediately that their vessel's at risk and, hey, we need to take a course of action here to fix this before it becomes derelict. And then a lot of times, as I'm investigating the derelict, that sticker is going to be on there as well. And I do have a copy of it today if you guys would like to see it up close versus on the PowerPoint itself. So I will pass that to you, sir. So
We will have to retain that for records, just so you know.
that is fine, yep. I have plenty copies of it, so.
I figured.
So when I first get to these vessels, I'm looking at the vessel, I'm identifying what's wrong with it. If it's sunk, if it's aground, if it's got no propulsion, no steerage, if it's completely junked, all the different categories that FWC has described previously during their presentation. Again, I put my information on there, a contact number for the sheriff's office to contact me, the case number, as well as there's check boxes on there that show why this vessel could be a concern in Charlotte County. So once we identify the owner, they have to be served the paperwork, which includes a criminal citation as well as the derelict vessel notification packet. Again, FWC went over this earlier. We prefer to try and do it in person for the fact that we can physically hand them that paperwork. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. A lot of times we're going through addresses and phone numbers, everything we can to try and find them. We use various different software to look up history of the person, whether they got a new address that they've not updated with DHSMV. We have in-house systems as well as our crime analysis and our intel division do offer assistance as well. And as well as putting out a BOLO to road officers to say, hey, if anyone has had contact with this person, please let us know, or if you see them, get all their current information so that we can contact them. If an owner lives out of county in a farther jurisdiction that we're able to drive to, or they live out of state, which does happen sometimes, they'll sell their boat, they'll give away their boat, and they'll move to another state. We then send certified mail with restricted delivery so that only the person that owns that boat can sign for that, so it shows that this person has signed and knows now that they got this paperwork. If that's the case where they're out of state or they're well out of county, we then put in a warrant or a summons request through the state attorney's office for the criminal charge for allowing vessel to become derelict. That's where the issues run into with the extension when, as FWC explained, a lot of times it's not days and weeks. We're talking weeks, months, and usually a few months. And it's because of having to track down this person, the owner of the vessel. And then if we cannot find them, then we have to go and send them the certified mail, and hopefully that will get to them that way. But we have to wait for the Postal Service to deliver the actual certified mail, as well as get that return receipt showing that they received that packet. Before then, we can put that 21-day notice on the vessel, which I'll get to shortly. Again, a lot of times it comes back undelivered because that person has moved. So what happens if that owner is not located? We've done all our due diligence. We've checked everything. We've knocked on doors. We've checked relatives. And we have software that can find relatives of that person, phone numbers, social media. And we've done everything to find this person, and he has just gone off the grid. At that point, we've exhausted all our methods. We've done our due diligence. We will then sticker that vessel with a 21-day notice saying, we've done it all. Here's the last chance. If you own this vessel or you have an interest in this vessel, you need to contact us within these 21 days. Otherwise, there's going to be action taken to remove this vessel. So as I was saying, that notice, the 21-day notice, I'm going to pass that to you as well. You can keep that as well. It's a 21-day notice sticker that's affixed to the vessel. This contains, again, all the information pertaining to the case, coordinates, where the vessel is, the make, model, year, registration number, our case number, and then contact information for me, as well as saying that you need to take the correct course to remedy this situation or this vessel will be removed. Again, we photograph and document everything to show that we put it on there. As you can see, the yellow sticker in the photos there is right next to it from when I first made contact with this vessel. After that 21 days has expired, I then complete my removal supplement. And this is basically just going through saying, this is what we've done. We've started the case, we've identified the location, we've verified it meets criteria, and when it was entered into the database, if we identified or unidentified the person, if the owner has been summoned, the date that we served the paperwork to him, when we posted the sticker, as well as verifying that there's been no administrative hearing that has been requested through the county, because they do have a right to contest the fact that we are calling this a derelict vessel in the county. After that, we still verify that the time has lapsed, that the vessel's still in that derelict status, and then this letter gets sent through my chain of command, and it is then sent for approval for removal. After I get that letter, get that checklist back saying it's all good to go from my supervisors, I then contact Mr. DeBruler with the County Natural Resources. And I've worked hand-in-hand with him many times, and this is the letter that I actually sent to him saying, this is the vessel, this is where it's located, here's all the identifying marks, registration, hull identification numbers, and the coordinates of the vessel, and then a physical location. And part of it is I tell him that he can now remove the vessel per Florida statutes. Then he contacts for the bidding process and then gets the contractor to remove the vessel. So removal process, once they tow the vessel in, they get the water out of it, the contractor or the removal company loads it up, takes it to the dump, and they have to send me photographic proof that the vessel has been removed from the waters and destroyed. With that, they send me copies of the landfill fees and the invoices so that I know how much to contact the owner with to tell them this is how much you now owe to pay for that vessel. And this is just a sample letter for one of the vessels that was removed. Price varies depending on size of vessel, tonnage, how much weight there is. A lot of times with the sunken vessel, you're going to have some silt in there as well that's going to add to that weight. And so, for example, this one was $5,750, and this bill gets sent directly to the owner. So the average is about $5,000. It can be higher, it can be lower. As I said, it's case-by-case basis as well as how much the contractor bids for that vessel. And then, as FWC said, that if they do not pay, their privileges to register new vessels, new vehicles, and renew vessels and vehicles can be suspended. Again, I'm just going to go to a couple of issues that can cause delays. Vessels are no longer owned by that registered owner. And this happens a lot. What happens is and you might see it online, people put up free sailboat. Just come and take it. People love free stuff, so they go, they sign over the paperwork, and that vessel goes a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then it goes derelict. Now, the new owner might not have registered it, might not have went to the DMV and said, hey, I bought this vessel for free, I'm the new owner. And then the old previous owner might not have sent that little tab up top back to the DMV, or there might have been a clerical error that showed that they did not update it in the database. So then I go into the database, I look, and I see all right, did they do this correctly? Is it in there? And there's a little area on the bottom that shows, yes, this was sold, but it has not been registered by the new owner. And usually there's a name in there. Sometimes there's not. But when I contact that previous owner, best case scenario, they say, I have all the documentation that shows that I sold it. I can email it to you. I can meet with you. Here's copies of it. And I've had some success where they give me a picture or a scan of the title that they signed over to the new owner with the driver's license, contact info. And then I've had cases where it's just written on a napkin or a piece of paper saying, I sold the vessel to, and then some scribbles, and it's very hard to read. So that's one of the issues, and that can extend the process because now we have to find that new owner and go through the process again after searching for that previous owner. Vessel owner is difficult to find or evading contact. This happens. Vessel owners, they will talk to me on the phone, but they won't meet me in person. They don't want to give me an address to mail their stuff to. So again, it comes down to due diligence at that point. I've talked to them on the phone. I've told them what's going on. They're aware of what's going on. I've made my due diligence at that point, and then at that point we can go forward and sticker the vessel. Owner lives out of state. We discussed that with certified mail. Owner requests an administrative hearing. This can happen. That is one of their rights during that 21-day process to request an administrative hearing. That can delay the removal of the vessel. Vessel is moved elsewhere, but still on state waters and derelict. It's like a game of hide and seek. You take it from one area, bring it to the next, and then have to find it in the new area, and the clock will still run at that point. Or the best case scenario, the owner goes, gets the vessel into compliance, gets it floating, gets everything fixed on it, which is what we ultimately hope for. So the one issue is that you must have that 21-day count. This needs to be applied due to due process violations. We don't want to violate their ability to take their own course of action to fix their situation before we take action against them. I did speak with Pinellas County as well, with Sergeant Blair with Pinellas County, because they had issues with their derelict program prior to going to what they do now. And they were actually mirroring the criminal side of it with the civil side of it. So they were actually waiting for the criminal case to be completed before they went forward with the civil side of it. So that took, from what Mr. Blair was saying, years at times, because you'd have to go through the whole criminal aspect of it through the court system and then go into that civil process. They do follow similar guidelines to us as well as FWC. Where they do different is with their 21-day process. When they identify a derelict vessel, they sticker it that day and they send out that certified letter same day. So they don't actually physically contact or physically serve that person. They send that certified letter out. And then they follow just pretty much the same process from there on out. And they use one contract company to remove the vessels, and it's usually about 2 weeks for them through their contract company. All right, I appreciate your time. Commissioners, do you have any questions for me?
Got a couple in the queue. Commissioner Deutsch?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think it's been informative for a lot of people knowing what you guys have to go through to try to make things happen. One of the things I think that might be of interest and maybe something we can do is oft times if someone's, I don't want to pick on a particular state, from another state up north and they're not going to come back down here, they don't care if they're not going to register another vessel or their vehicle here. However, and I'm sitting here thinking about it, Florida is a participant in the Driver's License Compact Program, which specifically involves interstate sharing of information regarding registration and licenses. I believe most states are now participating in this. And the interesting thing is, if we don't do it, and this might give us a little bit more leverage, when they get to the point, and there's only a few that do, but when they get to the point that they lose the ability to re-register a vehicle or a vessel, that we take that next step and advise the other states and places where they could get a license that their ability to register a vehicle here or have the license, if that's the case, is suspended. The other states, by nature of the compact, the participants, and I believe all 50 states are now, have to respond to, and therefore if your license theoretically is suspended in North whatever it is, and they tell us, we'll suspend it here and you won't get your license here as well. But I don't know if that's a step that we can take. May want to deal, with through the sheriff's office specifically to see if that's a step that would give us just a little bit more leverage to maybe get a response when they realize in Washington or Oregon or North Dakota they can't register a vehicle or a boat because of them not taking that responsibility here. It's a suggestion. I don't know if we've explored it, but it might be worthwhile.
That is an excellent idea. I do not know where that would fall jurisdictionally, if that would be something that DHSMV would have to verify with the other.
Probably through the registry, I would
Yeah,
think.
probably through a DHSMV at that point. We do send notifications to the DHSMV to suspend in-state. I don't know what their legality or what their boundaries are from there on out at that point. But that is an excellent idea for to look
And
into.
thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner DeSalle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the grant money that's used to remove derelict boats, you mentioned that the repayment by withholding registration for vehicles has been a very effective tool. But if you've received grant money to remove the vessel, towed it, and then an owner came forward and ultimately paid all the fees to remove it that you were given the grant money for, what happens?
If they actually repay
If they pay the bill, the invoice you just showed.
So they pay that invoice. The minute I find out from Mr. DeBruler that they have met their financial obligations, we then notify the DHSMV that they can lift those restrictions. So
No,
it's not
but I mean the grant money.
Where the money goes.
It's almost like, it seems like it's double dipping. So,
I understand, yes.
do we repay the grant?
That would be something either I'd have to check with FWC or Mr. DeBruler on, see how that process is handled on that part.
Mr. Suchil can come forward.
So, yes, depending on where the money came from, it goes back into that, so it refills the pot, so that we can continue.
Okay. So how often do we, because you said, you get paid a lot once you withhold registration of vehicles. So are you continually giving money back to the grant system?
I believe so, yes. I'd have to check to give you an actual number of how many people have repaid. A lot of times it's, these people, their vessel went derelict for a reason, because they didn't have the money, so they work out a settlement. They give as much as they can to get back. It does go back into the grant.
Okay, well, that's what I was trying to figure out, because I started seeing, wait a minute, it's almost like we're getting double dipping, because some people are coming forward, you mentioned, and paying. Yeah. We're getting the money from the grant. How does that process work? I assume it's a stipulation in the grant agreement that if you get paid back, I don't know, I'm assuming that.
So the repayment letter, when it's sent to the individual that's being cited, say we did a direct removal, and the demand letter will say you need to pay back Florida Fish and Wildlife with the check sent to Department of Financial for FWC, and that's where the money, it'll go back there, it'll get put back into the grant. If it was the county did it itself, funded the vessel, the deputy would do the repayment letter to Charlotte County, and then Charlotte County's budget would be put back.
I guess what's interesting, when we first talked about the $8 million, I assumed, I looked at it like kind of in a vacuum. There was no repayment on my mind, but then I started, as we went through the presentation, I'm like, wait a minute, it's almost self-refilling itself, because it's not just us. If everybody's collecting money, even if they collect 50% of, let's say 50% are uncollectible, but there's certainly, it sounds like there's a pretty good number that's going back into the grant program, and it's constantly replenishing itself. That's what it would seem.
For the most part, because there's a lot of vessels out there that we can't identify an owner. It's been derelict for so long, there's no identifiers. So what we can get back, we get back, and we put it back into the fund.
In Charlotte County, just curiosity, are you finding that the recovery, is it like half the vehicles that you pull, are you getting recovery?
Oh, perfect.
Since our program started in 2007, we've removed 230 vehicles, and we've been repaid for 7.
Okay, well, that answers that question, because it sounded like you were having great success with the other, I thought you were like getting reimbursed in droves.
It's gaining traction. I mean, we are having success through that. It's
Well, I guess to the tune of 7 out of
that's for
200.
Charlotte County. I mean, we get a lot of it for down in Miami, the Keys and stuff like
Okay.
that. I mean, areas where
I'm thinking
there's a-
Charlotte County.
yeah, I'm thinking statewide on my level. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Constance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Deputy Nelson, thank you so much. Great presentation. Thank you for all the hard work you do. And, keep it up. I think this is interesting stuff. And to get to, I wasn't going to mention it, but since Commissioner Sayer brought it up, so were those 7 recently? Like in the last year, how many repayments have we had? 2. All right, so I mean, that's 25% of them in the last year. So I mean, maybe there will start to be an uptick. It'll be very interesting to see. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just one thing I just want to just point out with those decals that I did provide you guys. The nice thing about those decals is it shows the public that we are on this. We are watching this. We know this is out here. So I'm hoping that will help alleviate those concerned citizens' phone calls that they think that nothing's happening. If that sticker's on there, we're actively looking into it. We're working hard to find that owner. It might not be an immediate removal, but we are doing everything we can to make sure that the waterways are getting cleaned up in the county.
So they're driving, they're going by in their boat, they see the yellow sticker, and 3 weeks later, or 4 weeks later, they see the orange sticker.
They'll
And
see
then
progress.
Yeah, and then get a big red square and shove it on there when it's time for that thing to get removed, so they know, that's it, it's over.
That would be a good idea.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
Deputy.
you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Next will be Justin McBride, the Executive Director of WCIND, to talk to their process.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good
Justin
morning, sir.
McBride, WCIND, always a pleasure. I'm going to answer a lot of your questions, Commissioner Teseo, on the other end, not the law enforcement end, but the removal end. So how does WCIND fit into this whole picture? So first and foremost, WCIND funds removal. Provides funds for the removal, either county administered. This can be through your annual allotment or through your CNIF funds. It is completely and utterly covered with WCND rules to spend WCND money on removal of derelict vessels. We also, my board has had very good foresight for the last 5 or 6 years to allocate regional money for removal of derelict and abandoned vessels throughout the district. And we proceed with that only at county request. So I want to stress that WCIND is a removal agent only. That is the term that the state uses for the counties, cities, municipalities that are actively contracting for the removals. We are removal agents. In order for any removal agent to remove a vessel from the state waters, we have to have authorization from law enforcement or some other legal authorization to remove a vessel. We have in the past used certain county ordinances or city ordinances, but right now we're relying on the laws that both officers talked to you about. We also, WCND works as a liaison between FWC and local LE. You heard in both presentations that every year something new is happening with the derelict vessel laws, and we endeavor to bring all local law enforcement together with folks like Lonnie and people from Tallahassee that are on the front tip to make sure everybody understands the new rules and the tools available to them. We facilitate law enforcement training, usually 2 to 3 workshops a year to get everybody together to make sure everybody's up to speed. And we talk with Tallahassee about new training for new procedures, and I know, I've been at several of your meetings where you've had information for me to take to Tallahassee, which I have forwarded, which has necessitated some changes to some of the state rules. Our bid process, we use a pre-qualified vendor process. We went out for a request for qualifications, and we qualified a host of vendors that we believed, yes, they can do this. So we have a 3-year contract with each one of those. Every single one of us is under contract, and they're pre-qualified to offer continuing services. We have, I think, 13 right now. When we have a batch of vessels to go, we send to that pre-qualified number of vendors, and it's a very quick process. It allows for a lot faster turnaround than, say, a general. If you were to put it out to general, then you're talking that 60 to 90 days that you were talking about earlier. We do ours a little bit quicker, and then as soon as we get the bids in, we can issue an immediate bid, immediate work order if we're not pursuing state reimbursement. So this is kind of our bidding timeline, just so you guys know. If we are looking to, what we typically do is we ask all 4 counties, do you have any vessels that need removal? And we'll give them a week to get us information. We'll take, that takes 7 days. Then we'll put our bid documents together. That usually takes another 7 days. And we get it out to our vendors, usually faster than 14, but we'll just say 14. We give them 2 weeks because we expect our vendors to go on site to actually put their eyes on that boat to give us an accurate cost for removal. So from the time that we ask the counties when we need a bid to when it's opened, it's usually 2 to 4 weeks. After it's opened, there's 2 tracks of time. If we are not going after state funds, we'll give them the work order on day 1, and they typically have 30 to 60 days. Our contractors are really quick in this area because, with the 13, we have them spread all 4 county areas. They really move on it quick, and we invoice them and pay them right away. If we are going for state funds, as you heard earlier, we will send that application up to FWC. All those documents have to be approved before we can issue a work order. And FWC in the past, it was a very long time. They are now extremely fast. So that isn't really holding us up any longer. So even though it's usually about 14 to 30 days for that, we get that contract back from FWC and we can issue our work order. It's between 1 and 90 days for the removal timeline.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm getting a little confused here now on who's paying for what. So, WCIND provides funding for the removals.
Correct.
But if you use your funds and don't go through the state bidding process, it's not reimbursable.
Correct. We don't go through, there are times when we choose not to use the state.
And that's why I was saying, why wouldn't you be using state funds?
2 reasons. Number 1, we don't want to wait. We don't want to wait any time that the boat has got to go. Let's just get it now, go. And we have quite a bit of budget for that. And we budget every year for that. So we just know that, the ultimate goal of this program is to clean the waterways.
But I think what you just said is that because the state has streamlined the program, it's much quicker than it used to be. So why would you want to use your funds if you only have to wait an extra 2 or 3 weeks to get the funding through the state?
As I said, 2 reasons. Some, we just don't want to wait at all. And other, they're out of money. Oh, okay, yeah, and a good example is a boat on the beach or the boat that was in front of Sunseeker. We weren't going to wait any more time for that. That would have added 30, 45 days. That boat needs to go.
So out of all the derelict vessels that you're removing, how many do you actually go through the state funding?
I have a slide for that.
Okay. Because I saw the removals, but I just wasn't sure on a, okay, you got 79 vessels removed. How many were grant funded? Okay, 3, okay. I don't know the number, but go ahead.
I'll continue. If I don't answer
keep
that,
going.
I'll come back to it. Yes, sir.
One more quick one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, but the removal timeline, so if you do it, it's about 30 to 45 days quicker than the state? Is that what I'm understanding on average?
That's probably fairly accurate, and not than the state. That is if we are asking for state funding.
Right, I'm saying if WCIND funds it directly versus going through the FWC process, it's about roughly 30 to 45 days quicker on average.
That's probably a good.
And then from time opening to removal, 1 to 90 days, when have you ever had the boat out in 1 day?
Sunseeker.
Okay, thank you.
You knew he was going to have an example.
Well, I wanted to know that 1 day boat. Okay, thank you.
And actually, there's probably more than that, but that's the last one that was a 1 day. Okay, so this hopefully, Commissioner Tsay, will answer your question. Over the past 3 years, the district has facilitated the removal of 79 vessels, about $500,000. Of that, grant funds were about 370, and we used about 156. So about 70% of our vessels were grant funded, 30% were not.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, and the ones that the 156,000 you funded, it was just those were ones that you deemed you couldn't wait.
Those were the ones that we deemed that couldn't wait, and also I'm not throwing shade on anyone, but every year the state fund runs out of money.
Yeah, because that's what I was getting to earlier, you know, that $8 million, and was it 3 million plus the additional?
Yeah, there's been significant push, and 8 million is awesome. That's the most, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and every year the state fund has run out of money. The state's done two things that's been awesome. Number one, they used to be 75% reimbursable, so we only used to get 75% of the money back. Now it's 100%, so we're getting 100% of the money back. In a grant fund, and also they keep increasing. And the question was, oh, it should take care of all. No, we need 16 million. This problem statewide is only going to keep getting better. I've seen cycles, and and I'm sure I've spoken to you guys about it before, the cycle recently with COVID, the uptick in boat sales is just been unbelievable. So I'm estimating in 8 to 10 years, the upcycle of DVs and derelict vessels is going to increase too. So it's something that we can't assume 3 or 8 is going to stay what we're going to need to take care of it. We're going to have to keep pushing the legislature for more and more funding.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you clarified that, because earlier when we were kind of talking about the money, it seemed like it was sufficient, and it's like, why'd we go to 8 million? But now what you're telling me is we've run out every year. That wasn't the impression I got earlier on.
But you have to recognize that you live in a region of counties that are extremely active in this. There are many counties in the state of Florida that don't have the funds even to front the removals, that don't have the staff for removal. So FWC is going to be using considerable amount of their funds in the next 3 or 4 years to take care of those counties that haven't known what to do. So there's a backlog there, but then we'll continue to deal with the pipeline of vessels that continue to fall into disrepair in our active counties.
Well, again, I just reiterate that the $8 million, I was kind of wondering why is the legislature seemed like they were overfunding something that it seemed it was sufficient at the time, but now you're saying you've run out every year. Now it makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and so where else is there an inland navigation district on the East Coast?
There's an inland navigation district on the East Coast that encompasses 12 different counties. They do fund derelict vessel removal, but they do it in a different way. They're not as active as we are.
Okay. And to that point, we're very fortunate that we have this organization's regional effort, because if you go any further north or south, they're kind of on their own. They've got to do it as a county, which sort of encumbers it, whereas you're very specialized and focused on this.
Yeah, the board, as I said, had really great insight 5 or 6 years ago to get this program started and to follow through with it. And I know it seems like, you know, there's going to be bumps in the road, but overall, I mean, with the law enforcement partners, I would put this team up against any in the region as far as being on top of derelict vessels. You know, Captain Carpenter, Captain Sushel, all our sheriff's offices, it's a priority for them, and they're doing the job they should be doing, and it's fantastic.
Totally agree.
I mean, that's why we're talking 79 vessels. I probably, in the, you know, my 20 years, I've worked over 1,400 derelict vessel cases. So,
thank you.
I think we can accept him as an expert.
Yes, sir.
all right. Any other questions? I'm going to make sure I got. I did want to follow up with what Commissioner Tiseo was asking. If we do get a grant for the removal and we get repayment, that money does have to go back to the granting agency. So we just act as a pass-through, but Captain Sushel is correct that the letter that gets sent to whoever's vessel it was, they have to repay the removal agency, and then it's up to the removal agency to repay the granting agency.
One more question, I'm sorry. Were you going to cover the process in Sarasota?
Sure, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, if you could.
Okay, so what
Before you do that, I have Commissioner Deutsch.
I'm sorry.
But just so I was thinking back when I was on WCIND, we got that. We were the first ones in the state, I believe, to get that, the regional assistance with the derelict boats, weren't we? I thought we were the first.
I think we may have been the first navigation district to get some
Yeah.
grants, correct.
And it gives us that extra dimension, particularly with some of the larger boats. One not too long ago, you know, was a boat that we had a real challenge with, and I know that this helped get it removed.
Right, and yeah,
Thank you.
as I
Good
said,
to see you, Justin.
Good to see you too. We only do the removals at the county request, because each county has their own removal program. Tina and Roger are doing a great job, but we always give them the option, hey, if you guys are, if it you know, we're doing one. You want us to take some for you, or is there one it's too big for you, you don't have the budget, we'll do it. So it works in all the different counties, and we always have some way to do it. What Commissioner Constance is alluding to is that we have a rapid relocation program. It's different than the at-risk. I just want to make that clear. It's not associated with the state program. From time to time, we do have vessels that do not fit at-risk and do not fit derelict vessel, but need to be moved for public safety, health, and welfare. And so we have allocated regional funds, and we've been trying it out in Sarasota, where we have, again, a list of pre-qualified vendors. Like if we have a vessel that ends up on the beach and it's not leaking fuel and it's not in danger of breaking up, that's still a danger to public safety, health, and welfare, but unfortunately it doesn't fit into some of the definitions that FWC would use to remove it. So we then relocate the vessel, and then we work it as a derelict vessel.
It just happened, and it's still seaworthy, so get it out of there fast, and you can still relocate it without having to activate any of these programs.
Right, yes, that's exactly right. And it turned out to be, we've spent a minimal amount of money on it, but we've gotten some boats out of some trouble.
Is there a template that you can share with our people on how to set up these relationships so that we can maybe try to take that pilot program and do it in Charlotte County?
We're already working with Tina on it.
Okay, very good.
We're going to roll it out to Charlotte County probably, I'd say in the next 6 months. It really, there's not a template from an agency. We have to find the right vendors, if that makes sense, and we have to come to an accord with them.
Okay.
Because it is a different type of contract.
All right, well, I'm glad we're making progress on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners. I'm just going to run through what the county process is and where we assist law enforcement and what our role is. So the primary investigations and implementation of that is through the law enforcement agencies. We assist through finding vessels, taking them out if needed, verifying locations, anything we can do to assist in those early days. As the vessels are being evaluated for at-risk, Roger stays in contact with the officers, and once they determine it is either at-risk, abandoned, derelict, Roger will enter that into our county database on the interactive website and as well as the monthly report that we provide. While the investigation is ongoing, Roger just stays in constant contact with the law enforcement officers. When the owners are provided their information, if there is any assistance that we can provide, if it's needed or requested, we are happy to do that. We have sent out certified letters in the past with the notice for their administrative hearing. After the vessel is stickered, if they choose a hearing, that is something that we can do through our local special magistrate process. That was included in our last ordinance revision for the abandoned derelict vessel. And after that, we will either initiate the FWC grant process or move on to our removal process. Once the removal authorization letter is provided is when our role really starts. So once we get the authorization letter, we will do a site evaluation with the contractor. We'll verify the removal status again with law enforcement, and the contractor will provide us a removal date. If the vessel is too large for our contractor or there's some other issues, we can request WCND assistance at that time. We notify the landfill that we will have an incoming vessel. If we have submitted for a grant, we'll wait for that approval, and then we will coordinate with the agencies to let them know when it is being removed, and then we'll remove the vessel and dispose of it at the landfill. Some proposed improvements for our role. We brought the resolution to the board in April to fast track that grant process on the county side so we can get closer to that 2-week to a month time frame with FWC. We are working with purchasing to look at other options we have to restructure our contract with our annual contractor and vendor to see if we can mirror something similar to WCIND or have multiple contractors available. WCIND and the county are going to look to host an interagency coordination meeting, especially with some of the new programs that FWC is rolling out, and then also working with WCIND on that rapid removal or relocation program. Questions?
This has been a great presentation. Very thorough. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. I do have a question that I don't believe that this would be the case anymore, but I've been here a while, and I think people who've been here for a long time remember the old shrimp boat that sat in the Mayaca River for about 10 years. And I was told back in the day that it was because if they removed it, they were going to do more damage than what it was doing just lying there. Do you remember that?
That would be a Roger question.
I knew I could engage Roger when I brought this up. You remember that one?
Roger DeBruler, Charlotte County Parks and Natural Resources. Yes, I remember. 1972 is when that boat went down. And at that time, there was a big fight with DEP and the state, and everybody was all in an uproar. I believe it was 94 that DEP actually hired a contractor, and they went out and they began cutting most of everything that was above the sand. They deemed that the vessel would cause more damage removing it out of the sand, digging it up, than it would be just to leave it. And that's where it stands today.
Wow.
It is still there. You can still see it. A lot of fishermen love to fish around it. So, yes, I remember the boat very well.
Thank you for that history lesson. I appreciate it. Commissioner Doherty?
Roger, I think the agency, though, actually back in those days was DPC, Department of Pollution Control, in 72, 73. Then it became DER, then DEP, if I'm correct.
Wasn't that the year you moved here?
73.
73. I'm not going to talk about where I was in 73. All right. Nothing else on this issue? We will move forward then. Thank you all very much for that great presentation. Very thorough. Very thorough. With that, we're going to go to the presentation of the Port Charlotte Beach Park. This ought to be another interesting presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Travis Perdue, Facilities Director for the record. We're bringing back to you today the current master planning and site planning process for the Port Charlotte Beach Recreation Center as promised. What we have put together is just a condensed version of the overall master plan slides presentation for your review and discussion. I will go through and give some overarching highlights of each slide, and we'll take questions when we're finished with it. So the effort, this first slide does indicate some of the effort that was put into the site planning and some investigative work that was performed to identify a lot of the parameters that built the conceptual plan and the master plan process. Here's a slide that just identifies some vegetation areas and some directional views. This slide does identify with the proposed siting of the building, just the shading levels and the sun exposure levels throughout days and the summer and winter solstices. This slide here helps identify the elevation requirements based on the zoning, flood zoning, and grade levels. This slide does, this is a culmination of the phases that we went through citing the location. We took into consideration several critical path items to get to this point through the process of programming. The two major factors of that were the existing parking lot, maintaining its integrity of the work that was previously performed there and trying to impact it as least as possible. The second aspect of this exercise was the flow of the park and the flow of the campus, as you will, keeping the synergies of a park into a recreation center, and then into what you would see the pool and the beach, and then the boat ramp, and how that flows. The adjacencies of those, the parking adjacencies as well. A lot of those things were discussed and taken into consideration to come to this recommended siting plan for the new facility. This plan does identify what the demolition would look like there as part of this phase of this project. And I think that wraps it up. Yes, seven slides there. So we can jump back to wherever you guys like, whatever questions you may have.
Very good. Commissioner Constance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This first exposure, when you're showing the shading, though, is that where the current location of the building is going to be?
Proposed location.
Proposed rectangle is what we're looking at. So which one is, because I guess the diagram is due north. Is that correct?
I believe you are correct, yes. It does show the hours of the day through the 2 parts of the year of how much sun exposure the building would get in its proposed location.
Okay, because if I'm looking at this correctly, I'm thinking that the building would either be the way you have it in the diagram. Is that, if you can go to the proposed site, yeah, does that indicate due north in the far lower corner, the far right corner?
It does, yes.
Okay, so how is the building, so you've got it in the shading, you've got it canted, is that correct? Okay, just to show that, all right. And then, can you talk to me a little bit about the size of the swimming pool? Is that going to be, because I think I met staff yesterday and Mr. Scott said it was going to be 25 yards in length. Is that north to south, or is that east to west? So
I can just quickly answer that the siting of this pool is just for illustration. We've not gotten into any of the design and positioning of the pool itself.
So that's just that blue rectangle is just, it's going to be there, but we just don't know what it's going to finally look like. Mr. Scott, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning. Tommy Scott, Community Service Director. So yeah, so part of this phase was to do the siting, but through our public outreach efforts and our implementation as we move forward with the pool, it will be 25 yards in length. Again, we haven't decided which way that direction will go. That will become, the pool is a Tier 2 sales tax project, so the design and construction of it will come with that. So we're just in the siting phase of it here, but yes, we will be designing a 25 yard when we get to that.
So it may not even be in the orientation we see it. It might be angled more to fit, and while the length will be 25 yards, it might be 25 by 25. You might try to maximize the number of lanes available to...
Yes, sir. But the intent would be to make sure and ensure that we had the ability to do lap swimming, which we do not have with the current pool.
Correct.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner DeSalle.
Tommy,
You better hang close.
when you,
That spin that Tina taught me.
if you're going 25 yards, it's to encourage lap swimming.
That is, well, it's to afford the opportunity that they do not
Right.
have now.
That's right.
Correct.
Just make sure when you do the lane in which direction you don't have the sun for morning and late afternoon swimmers in your eye, because as you know, when you swim and you turn to breathe, the sun is directly in your eyes. Now you can have tinted goggles, but it's a pain. And lap swimming I used to do, I hated that. So just make sure you put it in the right, I don't know if it would be north and south. No, it would be east and west. So when you come up the side breathe, the sun's not directly in your eyes. You may want to think about that.
You know, and that's where good
You're a
bilateral breathing is a good effort to make sure you're only halfway going through those. But yes, sir, we'll definitely take that in consideration when we get
You know
into
what, you lap swim.
Yes, sir, you are absolutely correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. The placement of the rec center, that's significantly different than where it's placed now.
It is due east of where it is. As I had stated, we went through a few iterations. We showed the building in the existing location. We kind of workshopped that with all the stakeholders and kind of went through a risk, process to see what impacts it would have if we put it there. I can highlight that replacing or putting it where the existing building is offered a couple of high-level risks. One was just it really diminished the flow of the park and getting access into the building all the way down the parking lot. It segregated the beach from the pool from the the beach area, I should say, from the pool, from the building, from the rec, the tennis courts and the park set elements. So we took that as just a bit too high of a risk for a overall campus, if you will. We also looked at the siting up in the park area and where the tennis courts and the ball courts and that stuff is. It's a little higher elevation. We did do a little bit of an exercise on the cost of, the elevation limits there and the hardening of it outside of that a little bit higher zone. But replacing all those features as part of this, the cost comparison wasn't efficient enough. So this plan, as I stated with the team and the stakeholders, just seemed to be the best for the property.
How much larger is the footprint for the proposed rec center as opposed to the existing rec center?
It is twice the size. I would say currently, we're not in schematic yet, so we got to refine that square footage, and get all those down. But it'll be about twice the size of the existing.
Okay, so in your stakeholder meeting, did you determine uses? Was there some type of use study to determine the square footage allocation for this project?
That was actually determined in the public input process through community services, and Tommy might be able to speak to how that information was gathered.
So we had the department had preliminary put together the general programming, and then we went through a public input process, as Travis just alluded to understand the needs of the community. So in our that planning process, it involved making sure we had multiple spaces of varying size that were flexible, that we could have floating walls potentially to be able to use smaller and larger, and to make sure we could accommodate the needs of the users that utilize the facility, whether they were for weddings or event programs or regattas, just to make sure that we had enough usable space. So all of those came through as we went into the sizing of the facility, and then we'll get into the actual schematic design to actually how those all lay out. But this exercise was to make sure we could put all of those elements inside of the general square footage that we had allocated for the building. And so it works. Now we just have to do the actual design, which we're working on now.
And you may have provided this, I just don't remember it. So based on those discussions, were all the various uses provided to the board?
There was a final executive report that I believe was distributed. If not, we can make sure that we do that. Most definitely. It's a public document, so we can make sure that we get that up to the board. Yes, sir, I'll work with administration to make sure you get that.
Yeah, because if we had a budget for the replacement of the existing building, then we went through subsequent to that budget, we went through the needs assessment and essentially doubled the size. I was just curious what needs assessment was done prior, and then the needs assessment that was done through the roundtable and the various stakeholder meetings. What was the difference? Like, what? In other words, was it always proposed to be this side for the original budget, for sales tax?
So when we went into sales tax preparation, we had identified a general square footage that we wanted to accommodate. The needs assessment and the roundtabling you did with the public was to make sure and understand and to validate the needs that we had already identified, and to see if there were anything else that we were missing. And we got good feedback through that public process.
But the sales tax size of the building and the subsequent size of the building, the two different sizes. I don't know if the sales tax contemplated a building double the size for the rec center.
It actually, I believe it did. I think we've been about 20,000 square feet. I believe that's what the sales tax project was. Our needs assessment, I think, when the roundtabling was just to validate, could we make sure we were meeting all the needs of the constituents and users, or did we need to make it smaller? Do we need to make it bigger? And what we had identified was we were spot on with the needs of 20,000 square foot, and so now we've moved forward into the planning phase.
The old facility, well, the existing facility now, has a pretty large deck overseeing the water. On this one, I'm not, unless I'm just reading the site plan wrong, is that deck eliminated?
So again,
seeing a walkway that goes along the waterfront, but no deck.
So one of the feedback that we got during our needs assessment was to make sure we had outdoor space. We have, again, you're looking at large, high-level master planning of that. As we get into schematic, know that that will get fine-tuned as we go through the design, but we intend to have deck space. That has been something that is part of the requirement as we move forward. So it will be there. It's just not generally shown on this. This is high-level conceptual master plan.
Well, usually a deck of that size is, right now it's showing all this covered and no deck.
Think of it as a bubble. Don't think of it as a rooftop.
Right.
That is the space out.
Okay,
That's
gotcha.
the space allocation that we've given to
Just
it.
the footprint. It could be anything within that footprint.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, obviously, you're still going to have great views. I was concerned when I saw the movement because, being more towards that peninsula, you just had this vista. You can really get a really great view, when you're hosting events, if it's a wedding or whatever you're doing there. But you still get really good views where it is. And being that the footprint is the size it is, you would have to shoehorn it into the existing location to get it to work. And the functionality, according to what you're saying, just wasn't there with the parking lot and things like that. Yeah.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Doherty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just the only comment, recognizing this is conceptual, not even schematics yet. It just looks like with all the parking to the north, and we show our main entry to the center on the east end over here, that there may be some consideration to either considering another entry for the rec center on the west side of the building. Just so, think of bad weather, summertime, and all what the people have to do as far as patrons have to do to get into the building, or shifting the building a little bit more to the west, that's all. Just the concept, comment, that's all I've got right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Deutsch?
Yeah, I live just about a mile from there, and the neighbors obviously been talking about it. And one of the mistakes we made when we did those minor renovations a few years ago, we closed off the portico-type entrance to the facility, which necessitates that the only way you can get into that building when it's raining is to get wet. That was number one, and I know this is early and it's conceptual, but the people, particularly in the neighborhood and the community that use the facility quite a bit, I think that's a priority. In addition to that, I think it's also important that the proximity of handicap spaces be back to where it, or close to where it was originally, that you don't have to go 75 or 100 yards, as basically we do now, to hit a handicap spot. And I know this is going to come out, as we get further on. I think the idea of changing the configuration of the building, moving it a little bit to the east, is going to afford that facility with arguably probably the best sunset available in Charlotte County, and it's going to open up the building substantially in terms of being able to appreciate what a great environmental location that is with the water and the sunset, and seeing the activity that happens down there. And I know it's early, and the people in the neighborhood want to get involved. Some of them don't even want to see it there, but folks are excited about it. But I think the portico drop off and pickup has got to be a requirement in any new facility, because people really missed that when we made those changes, as well as the availability of the handicap parking. And last but not least, and he's not here now, but we have they give the awards out for the sailing program on that deck. So I know Gleason wouldn't let you move ahead at all with anything without including a large deck there, so we can have activities out there. But I know we got a long way to go, but thank you much.
But I can tell you that we did take into consideration that portico and that turnaround drop-off, and this affords that ability in this iteration here. The other options really made that a challenge. So this kind of checks that box.
Exactly. As well as the handicap parking should be much, much closer than it is now.
Right. And as far as the deck goes, we've got, this building will have to be raised, to a degree for sure. And we've got a lot of conversations that have to be had about access, to an upper deck from the boardwalk or from the inside of the building. And those conversations will be had through the next phase of design.
Commissioner Constance.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Caught you mid-sip, didn't I?
What's that?
I caught you mid-sip.
Yes, you did. Got to get my water in.
Yes, sir, you do. Okay, so appreciate the discussion about the bubble, and agree with everything that's been said, you know, that coverage on the drop-off, even having an expansive deck area with a cover. So in other words, you can still have a roof element built out over the deck, because most of the time people will want to be outside even if it's raining. So, you know, I really think it's a challenge because we're looking for a lot of really great imaginative design here from our consultant to make sure that this is really just a spectacular place to be, for people to have weddings, functions. You know, that's the whole idea, is we've been blessed with this piece of property and we're trying to do the best that we can, and we've been blessed with sales tax dollars. So just want to make sure that, you know, everybody's sort of thinking outside the box and thinking about the practicality of the use. You know, it's great if everybody's in the room and it's pouring outside and there's a deck. Well, what good is that? I don't even think having, you know, rollers that come out and having, you know, you want to have something that's storm safe. So it's a challenge. The other question I had was stakeholders. Can you or Tommy, can you just list the stakeholders that you've specifically met with?
Yeah, so they're different. The master planning process, you know, brought in different stakeholders than actual design through the design process. Our internal stakeholders are just the internal departments and ourselves, and then the design and the construction management teams. We do bring in external stakeholders at the point that they're, you know, required to have input, or at, you know, those phases that we need their you know, their input, and that's a community services driven, you know, they decide when to bring those people into those discussions. But
okay, well then
have
I'll
those
defer.
conversations.
Thank you for that. I'll defer to Tommy. Can you list the stakeholders that you have and will continue to be engaged with going forward?
Generally, and with some specificity. During our needs assessment phase, we did 2 public meetings, and we had planned and budgeted to do a third. And that one was always intended to be, once we got into schematic design, to say we take your needs and wants, and then we were going to go through a design process and then bring it back to them. But our first 2 needs assessment public outreach roundtables included members of the sailing associations, the sailing center that is currently on property, local residents, event producers that produce events down at the facility, swimmers that utilize the facility, swimmers that don't utilize the facility that would like to, hence the 25 yards. But we got a pretty good cross-section of representation from people that use the facility and would like to, and have a general interest, and then would like to see it grow so that they could do more at the facility during our first 2 public meetings. And then with most of our things, we'll take these plans around, and as we move forward with discussions, we'll have discussions with our advisory boards too. We typically bring things that include in parks to the Parks and Rec Advisory. I know the Marine Advisory Committee will have a vested interest, so we do updates on projects as well to those. So not only have we done the public outreach, we've been discussions with advisory boards, and then as we move forward, we already have planned 1 more public outreach meeting as we get a little further into design, and then we'll continue to update our advisory boards and the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, and I'm assuming you've reached out to the individuals that utilize the bocce ball courts, and they're okay with you moving their facilities, or have you?
So I believe that we did have representatives from a variety of different sport courts that were at our public meetings, because they did speak about those, and know that the bocce courts will move. We'll plan for that. We'll replan the triangle, if you will, where the sport courts and the playgrounds are, just because we have some amenities that need to be replaced. So outside of this process, community services will go through and work on that, so that way we can make that seamless transition to make sure that we provide that amenity moving forward, knowing that it's going to move, because again, to your point, the facility is planned to be right in the middle of where the bocce courts currently exist. Right.
I mean, and if it doesn't work to move them because they can't really be used through the construction process, I get that. But if it's something that, if that amenity can be moved early so they can continue to utilize that outside of the construction zone, that's great. If not, I understand, you'll be able to show us that they can't do that, but
right.
There would be outrage if they say, well, you've destroyed our courts and now we're going to wait 2 years to play again because you didn't plan correctly. So just...
We're cognizant of that, and that's why we're already planning on our side to make sure we can accommodate that potential move. Again, we needed to get through this presentation to make sure that you all were on board with where we were going, because if you said no, then that would completely change the direction we were going. But if we're okay with this, then we'll definitely continue to move forward with that.
Definitely appreciate, even though it's very high level, the fact that we're involved in the process. Thank you.
I'll say that Travis and his team have been leading great consultants that we've got, so they've been doing a really good job. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you,
Don't go too far. This is, my comments are, we've gone in and had good conversation and gone deep on this. But what I want to say, and to administration and to our design team particularly, as we look at incorporating everything in out there, I don't want anybody to forget that this is a special place. It doesn't need to look like anything else that we've got. It needs to take advantage of the views and of the opportunity that presents itself with this particular siting. The other thing that I mean that from an architectural, functional perspective. I don't want a Taj Mahal, obviously, but functionally and having decked and covered areas and all these types of things, we really need to go, I think, a little bit more over the top on this one, because I think this is going to be highly utilized once it's got the space, and it can accommodate some things. The other thing that I would ask is, as we're moving forward, I would like to see, as you guys develop the site plan, I'm a technical guy. This is getting into areas where I focus on. I'd like to be able to see what the siding actually looks like with measurements and things like that. Because conceptually, I know that's where we are right now. But as we move forward, I look at functionality, and we're not ready to really look at all the details yet. But if I can, Mr. Flores, I would really like to take a look at that as we get closer. And Commissioner DeSayo, he's back in the queue.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate those additional comments. So I do agree, this is very unique, and just because we're government doesn't mean it has to look like a government building. I'll give you an example. The new library in Punta Gorda, right? It's a government building, but we did some changes, adhering to a budget. We did go a little over, but I think aesthetically it fit what the community wanted, and it was a win-win for everybody. So I believe on this, we just don't want it to look like necessarily a box. I think we can take advantage of the unique circumstances surrounding this facility. Even the height, I always thought the height of that building was a little bit low. I always wanted to, if I could wave a magic wand, just the vista to go a little higher, a little bit more glass on the part overlooking the water, just things like that. And, obviously we haven't gotten there yet. But those are some of the things I would be looking at, and just the theme. What kind of theme, do we want for this facility? Like the library I indicated, they had a certain theme they wanted to maintain. Do we want a theme and give direction on this? I know staff did a great job at Centennial Park with the new rec center there. Yeah, it's a government building, but just with the colors, some of the finished materials, it looks nice. It looks really good. It looks modern. It's vibrant. And I want to make sure we don't miss any opportunities on this facility. And that may require more input from this board with the palette. And again, I don't even know what architectural style we have targeted for this.
So we do plan to bring back to you options when we get further into the design phase to show what elevation options we come up with. We do require that there are elevation, or I guess what you would say, the view or the visibility, what it looks like. We require that we're given options from the architectural firm for that. But we'll definitely take your comments back to them and make sure that we, focus on that, make those priorities so that we're giving you lots of different looks at it and lots of different options for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would also like to just comment on the elevation point, because we are forced to elevate the building regardless. The requirement of elevation is around 7.5 feet. That's the requirement. We did make the decision in our programming to raise it to 12.5 feet because just the benefit versus the cost there to have it to where it's accessible under the building just makes sense. So that kind of alludes to a little bit more of of that setting that you're looking for, or that type of theme that may incorporate into that under the building utilization. What that's going to look like, we'll bring back to you. We'll show it to you. We'll give you those options to take a look at.
Good. Commissioner Constance?
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate all those comments, and I think it's actually very good that you're going up. It's safer. You know, we're self-insuring, so we want to make sure that this thing is going to be standing for years and years and years. I don't even know if I'm settled on just a single level. I mean, there may be an opportunity for a hybrid building where part of it is 2 levels. I mean, obviously, you're probably going to need an elevator. So if we're looking at that, maybe one side has the big ballroom area, and that's a single level, but the other side of the building is 2 levels, and there's more ability to put space in it. So I don't, you know, I think this is too important. I'm going to echo the comments for design. You know, for space, going up another level may give us an even better view. So I don't think I want anybody boxed in on their concept. I think we should let the designers come back and give us lots of options, because I think we're going to get one shot at getting this right, and if it takes a little bit longer and a few extra views by this board, it'll be well worth it. But I really appreciate the work thus far and letting us in on the ground floor of this, and understand this is going to be a collaboration between the 5 of us and administration and you guys to get this right, and as many looks as we can get would be great. We're not trying to micromanage, but it's probably better that we tell you, hey, you have more leeway here than you think you have, because we want to get this right. So, thank you, sir.
It's a different perspective than we've given you guys in the past.
Yeah.
It's all been dollar related, and we've got to be, we're still on dollars, but we don't want to miss our opportunity to make this a really grand place so the public can enjoy it, and it has the amenities that make it really special. Commissioner Doherty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I guess before they go to construction documents anyways, there's 2 steps, the schematic design phase and the design development phase. So I think that's what the board's telling you right now, is that we come in with schematics. The documents are still at a place where we can move things around pretty easily. When they go to design development, DDs, it's really locking in at that point. So, but I still think we need to see it at DDs, because there will be a transition, Bill, you know, and from schematics. So I think we see those, we'll be good to go.
We're happy to bring as many options back to you as you'd like to see.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate it. Commissioner Deutsch?
What difference, and again, it's premature, but what difference in parking spaces do you anticipate with the expansion of the facility? Because it gets pretty tight in there, particularly with the activity where the boats are being, you know, taken in and dropped off, and the trailers left there. But we definitely need more parking places. What did you anticipate at this point?
So in the conceptual planning phase that we're currently in, as you can see, the demo plan might eliminate 4 parking spaces in this.
Well, you're going to have a real challenge, because I don't think, particularly doubling the size of that facility, you can't eliminate parking places. I think that's really important, and if anything, we have to add parking places. And I'm not suggesting taking out the tennis court or the basketball court or whatever, but that's going to be a challenge. You're doubling the size of that facility. We know we're going to have larger groups there. We know it's going to have greater use. We know we're going to have more people there. We can't cut parking places. So, you know, I'm only one of 5 here, but I think it's a valid point, and it's really important with the type of utilization the facility gets. Please bear that in mind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner DeSalle?
On this facility, how many parking spaces per, what is it, per 200 square feet or 100? I don't know how that building's classified. And I didn't see a parking calculation here where you have parking required, parking provided.
Next phase.
Right, and that's in the next phase, really, as we get into this, to the civil, the real details of the civil design. I don't know off the top of my head what the requirements per square foot would be, you know, based on use and.
Okay, so that, then the size of the building could change based on parking, once you do the calculations.
Or the parking could change based on the size of it.
Yeah, well, we'd have to find more room for parking.
Yes, sir.
I can't imagine the parking's going to go down. I'm sure that the parking that was provided was there to meet the buildings that we had.
It could be, yes, sir. It could have been expanded to meet the need, you know, as well. We'll get into that. We'll definitely take that into consideration, and we'll make sure that we're covered.
Well, we just did the parking lot renovation. How did you determine that parking lot count? Was it based on this building that's being proposed, since we knew we were going to go bigger, or was it based on the old building?
Mr. Cullen's coming up.
I'll let.
Maybe he can shed some light.
Thank you, Sean Cullen, Planning and Zoning Official. As Travis said, we haven't even, I don't think, pre-apped this yet. So for health clubs and indoor recreational facilities, it's 1 space per 150 square feet of floor area. Now, there's also other calculations necessary for other types of uses. So that for a 20,000 square foot building, that'll be about 134 spaces would be required based on that.
You know what we currently have since we just did the renovation?
No, we'd have to pull up those site plans and.
It may be on the first slide.
Could be, yeah.
Given setbacks or?
No. But we can certainly get that information, though.
Yeah, I mean, you have to plan through, but that is an interesting point about parking, because we have to meet our own code. Sure. And based on all the uses, so there will be a parking lot schedule once it's all in there, and we'll be able to figure it out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. All right, anything further? I see Commissioner Constance is.
No.
Okay, dial in. Want to make sure.
I'm just counting parking spaces.
Oh, jeez. We need to recess?
No.
Okay.
We're fine. Thank you.
Very good.
We'll bring this back to you in the next phase, the schematic phase, when we get a lot more development done.
Excellent.
And then we'll continue to, bring it back for more visibility, for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will go to our Manasota Key overlay. Parking. Speaking of parking.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, Sean Cullen, Planning Zoning Official. And please, it's also going to be a topic in this discussion as well. We seem to be doing a lot of parking. There are also provisions for parking studies within the code in order to adjust those parking requirements. Before I get started into my presentation, I just want to give the folks watching, we have had some conversations with some people, citizens of Manasota Key, where they seem to think that we may be proposing some changes to the overlay code. This presentation was a request by the board to just have some discussions based on some recent parking issues we've had down in Manasota Key. Staff is not bringing forth any changes. Staff is just bringing information for you folks to have a discussion on. So with that, I tailored this presentation in order to talk about the unique differences between our standard code and the Manasota Key overlay code with respect to parking. So there are a few key differences, and where items are not addressed in the overlay code, it defaults to the standard county code. One of the unique requirements is pervious materials. You have to have pervious materials in your commercial parking lots. So pervious pavers, there's very specific standards as to the gaps, the permeability of those pavers, and where that's required for new parking lots. This is all moving forward. This was created in 2004, and it was last updated about 2015. So some of these things have changed in that time period. Under the parking standards, for any residential development within the overlay district, each residential unit shall provide a minimum of 2 spaces. Multifamily developments shall provide additional spaces for services and guests. The service parking requirement shall be the lowest whole number that is greater than or equal to 10% of the number of units. We were paid by the word when we crafted this. Guest parking requirement shall be the lowest whole number that is greater than or equal to 20% of the number of units contained with the multifamily project. Beach access points on the island shall not be obstructed by parked cars or any other barriers. This is one of the big issues going on out there, is the on-street parking requirements. So I want to make sure that it was specifically in here that there is no blocking of beach access. Paid parking shall be prohibited on any parcel within the overlay district except on the public recreation lands, Englewood Beach. Leasing or rental of upland properties on the islands for short-term parking or long-term storage of vehicles or trailers shall be prohibited in all districts. Essentially, when this was created, and this was a citizen-driven overlay code, they didn't want other parking lots on the key. They understood the need for private standalone parking lots with Englewood Beach, and that is what was written into the code. So with these standard codes and regulations, on-street parking is allowed on any local roadway unless it's deemed no parking via ordinance. As you know, you've seen a few of those in the past couple of years come through, denoting new streets that have no parking. Currently, there's approximately 33 roadways designated no parking. A few more of them are coming before you in the next couple of months. All streets on Minnesota Key do allow for on-street parking, and that is part of the beach nourishment funding requirement. So off-street parking and loading facilities, that's for the commercial businesses. This was a big discussion related to a recent expansion of a property on Minnesota Key that we are working through permitting with right now. Whenever you expand an existing use, you have to bring the parking up and add the additional parking as necessary. The parking spaces needed are based on the use and the square footage. So an example is a restaurant is 1 space per 100 square feet. We do not calculate outdoor seating towards parking or impact fees. That's been a long-standing county policy long before even I got here. If it's covered solely by an umbrella or nothing, it's not considered to be covered. If it's got a solid roof or structure over it, then it would be covered and subject to parking and impact fees. So with that, I just wanted to briefly go over those standards and open it up for any discussion and questions that you may have for me.
Commissioner DeSalle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I heard you right. So there was some outreach years ago in terms of residents not wanting additional expansion of like parking lots along there. So that created a code that allowed on-site, on-street parking or off-street parking, whatever they call that. What was it again?
Well, on-street parking has always been allowed. Under the code, on-street parking is allowed anywhere unless it's specifically, you pass an ordinance denoting that there is no on-street parking allowed. That is standard across the entirety of Charlotte County.
So the fact that the residents were saying we don't want more parking lots out here kind of added fuel to people parking all over the place because the policy has been not to add parking lots down there.
This is not unique. All the barrier islands that have, not even just in Charlotte County, but that have restaurants and amenities, you go up and down the coast, Sarasota, Lee, Fort Myers, there's parking issues everywhere.
So on the part about the outside seating, that's interesting because, you know, you can build a deck, and I believe if it's uncovered or it's exempt from parking requirements, and there's a determination of what's covered and uncovered. It can be attached to the building, but still be open, I think, on all 3 sides. Is that, and that falls out of the parking calculation, is that correct?
No, if it is covered even with a soft covering, if there is a full if it's attached to the building, and it's, because we have actually that issue out on Minnesota Key right now with Lock and Key, another restaurant out there where they put out some umbrellas, and those have roll-down sides. So it functionally, in rain, can create an enclosed structure. That would be considered covered parking.
Okay, so...
Or I mean covered seating, I apologize. No.
Okay. So as long as it's covered, it has to meet the parking requirement?
That is correct, because that is an increase of the floor space. So another example would be the Sandbar restaurant. They have a number, probably about 20 picnic tables outside. You're not sitting out there in a monsoon. You're not, you don't utilize those all day, every day at that restaurant. So that is not calculated for parking and or impact fees.
So if somebody has a retractable umbrella, they open it up, it's covered, but it doesn't have sides on it. You're sheltered from the sun.
We still consider that uncovered part, or uncovered seating.
Okay. So one way, I guess, to have outdoor seating but not trip the parking code is to just have big umbrellas.
Umbrellas on picnic tables or other tables, that is what a number of outdoor restaurants throughout the county. And again, this isn't just limited to Minnesota Key. This is a standard across Charlotte.
They also, Minnesota Key has a special overlay district. So,
correct.
So we're talking about this specifically, not unincorporated Charlotte County in general. Just I'm talking about the beach. It is unique down there, and I've, since we had some complaints about parking, I've made numerous trips down there at different times of the day. And it used to be more seasonal, but it seems it's all year round now. You have some nice restaurants down there. People are traveling down there to eat. I get it. But for me to say there isn't a parking problem, that's not true, because I went down there and I couldn't get in to one particular venue I went to go see. I had to go up the road, stop, make a 3-point turn because I couldn't go in people's driveway, people, they don't want you turning around in a driveway. So I made a quick boom and went back, and then I couldn't find anything going back, and I came back another time. And then I finally found a place to squeeze in with my truck. But it wasn't just me, it was all over there. And over the, again, we're talking about longevity, how long we've been here. I mean, I've been here for over 4 decades. I used to go down there, parking was not a problem. You parked wherever you wanted, it was not a problem. And so things have changed, and it was brought to this board by some constituents who lived out there. There was a problem. It's a nuisance, a noise nuisance as well, parking nuisance, and then this board decided to put it on a workshop and have this discussion. I don't know what we can do about it because we're so limited in property and land down there, but I don't want to make it worse by allowing more seating. I mean, I want the restaurants to work, but is the system getting gamed by creating outdoor seating that doesn't trip the parking requirements? And the whole grandfathering in of, when you renovate, I think there's one particular facility, was the parking adequate to begin with? And I think staff had to go through a discussion to figure that out. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir, I do. And yes, that parking was put in decades ago, far prior to this Minnesota Key overlay, and many iterations of the county's parking code ago.
I guess, since this has been looked at, it was, I think you said 2004, then 2015?
Yes, the original overlay code, there was a citizens master plan that was done, a community plan, the Minnesota and Sandpiper Key overlay. We then created a code for that. A couple of years after I got here, there was another development that got permitted that the citizens did not like getting permitted, and so they approached the board. The board instructed staff to work with those citizens to change the overlay code, and that was brought back before you, this board, I should say, not necessarily you, but that was passed, and that is the current code that we were working under.
I mean, I sympathize with the residents that live down there and have to deal with it. I mean, if you're a tourist, what do you care? You're passing through, you're going to park where you can park because you don't have to live with it every day. Mm-hmm. So I do have sympathy for the residents down there. And I don't know what the answer is right now, or if there is an answer. Is this just part and parcel with, we live in a waterfront community, people take advantage, we have the beach right there, people want to go to the beach, so that parking lot fills up. Some people don't want to pay, so even if there's spots in there, they'd rather park in a spot where there's no payment required. I don't know if anything can be done there. But I do sympathize that there is an issue out there. I've seen it and experienced it myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have witnessed that as well. My in-laws actually live out on Minnesota Key on Beach Road, so yes, I'm down there regularly. It's no different than Venice Beach or Siesta Key or Lido or any of those. It's a tourist destination, and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of visitors to Charlotte County.
Anything further?
Can staff offer any solutions to alleviate the parking problem down there other than expanding or looking for additional space to put up parking lots?
Staff can make lots of recommendations. It's what this board would like us to look for. Again, there's a prohibition that you can't have standalone parking lots out there. There are a number of vacant parcels. I believe we do have a code case on one where they have started charging for parking. Now that we're off season, we aren't seeing it as much, and it's also typically on weekends, so it is kind of a little bit more difficult for staff to be able to address that one. Whatever you folks would like to do, I know some places utilize a shuttle system. I know some places they just deal with it. It is completely your choice.
Do we offer free parking at our parking lot after certain hours?
I would have to defer to administration or
I think I saw Tommy
services.
walking around. Is he still here? Oh.
Tina Powell, Parks and Natural Resources. We do not offer free parking after hours. After the parking lot closes at 9 p.m., law enforcement enforces no parking in that parking lot.
Well, that's interesting, because I'm almost wondering, because beachgoers are gone usually, I mean, they watch the sunset, but people start clearing out, in the late afternoon, they've had enough of the sun. I'm almost wondering if we do like a pilot and offer, after 6 o'clock, or 5 o'clock maybe, if there's spaces available, that there's no charge to people who want to park there and walk to the restaurants, and just offer that up to see if it helps alleviate some problems, because the infrastructure's there already. And I know there's some people, because you have to pay a fee, they're like, I'm just going to find a spot. But maybe if there's no fee, they'll be, oh yeah, it's free parking. And we advertise it. And people can go there after 5 when dinner hour starts, and it maybe pulls people off the road at least during those hours. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
For the 3 restaurants where our parking is near,
well,
or 4, people park there now. Whether they're paying or not, I can't tell you, but I do know they're parking there.
It does happen nightly.
Well, I don't know, how aggressive we are on, the collections. I know you need the app now to pay.
By app or phone.
Yeah, yeah. So are you saying people are parking in the parking lot anyway and they're not paying?
I don't know whether they're paying or not. I can't make that.
Well, it just seems
judgment, but
it just seems like low-hanging fruit. I mean, I'm assuming they're paying because no one wants to get a ticket for not paying, or they're just rolling the dice and parking there and saying, hey, maybe we're just not going to get caught. I also thought there was discussion by the board of putting up gates at one point. I don't know if that ever went anywhere.
We are still evaluating that. I believe we have another time that we're going to come present that to the board.
Well, that would clear all of that out, if there were gates up of anybody going in there without paying, because you need a code to get through the gate. But I don't know, just, trying to come up with a solution that is kind of the low-hanging fruit to see if it would help. Because if I'm going to park in there, I'm going to pay. I don't want to get a ticket. It's embarrassing, to go in. But I'm just saying there may be people who could take advantage of that. But it is a problem, and we're problem solvers. And I don't know or it's just, that's just the way it is. It's inherent to, that area, and that's just the way it's always going to be.
And I can discuss that with Tommy and administration and see if that's part of what we can bring back with the gate and other parking solutions, and we can evaluate it as a pilot program and present that as an option.
Because I know when I went there were some cars that tried to wedge in, and they weren't parallel to the road. They were pulling straight in, and the rear ends were sticking out. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're riding a bicycle, there's no safe place to go. You're going to be eating a bumper for lunch, not at one of the restaurants. It's a very unsafe situation. I know we rectified a lot of that on with the sidewalk project, but that's on the south side of Minnesota, of the beach. We put that sidewalk in there, and I took a tour of that too. I just want to see how it came out. It worked out well. Now you don't have to be in the road anymore. If you have the stroller, riding your bike, if you choose, you can get on the sidewalk and be safe. You don't have that on the other side as much, because there's no sidewalk on that side where the restaurants are, on the off-beach side. So it's very dangerous. And then, it gets into a safety issue here. And that's another concern that I had, not just finding a parking spot, but there's safety issues going on down there. I think Mr. Elias is here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, Johnny Elias, Public Works Director. I think we do have a proposed sidewalk plan to the north with, I think, some additional decorative lighting.
Yes.
I think I might have just signed off on it to bring it before the board for the design.
I don't remember what it looks like yet, but yes, I remember it being worked on.
So people won't be able to then park anymore once the sidewalk goes in.
I don't know how the proximity of the sidewalk, I don't know if it's going to be incorporated into a bike path. I'm not sure any of that, but there's definitely a facility going down through there that I'm assuming would lessen the amount of room for people to park there.
Right. Well, then guess what? We're going to have even a greater problem, because right now they're using that as the parking. So if we put in a facility, a sidewalk on the restaurant side, I don't know, is that the north side? No, it would be the east side.
North from the roundabout. I don't know which side of the road we've landed on or any of that yet.
So it could be on the beach side, the sidewalk?
It could potentially be, yeah.
Okay. Well, either way, you're not going to be able to straddle and park right over a sidewalk, and I mean, that's not going to happen.
Understood.
So, yeah, so that's going to be even a bigger problem. If we think we got problems now, once we put in a facility there, who knows what's going to happen?
I didn't mean to muddy the water. I just know that you were talking about there's not a facility going up through there, and I just wanted you to know that there is.
There is, at some point, yeah, at some point. So, I mean, we may not be addressing it now, but we see a problem coming if we approve to move ahead with that facility. And then what are we going to do? I mean, that's why it's probably important, we asked that this be put on a workshop to have this discussion on solutions. I'm just not hearing anything right now.
Staff would be more than happy, with the instruction of the administrator, to discuss internally, look at other options, possibly if one of the issues is vehicles sticking out in the road, possibly parallel parking only sort of thing. It's a very constrained area.
It's constrained, and there's areas that we may have to look at to actually eliminate that option in certain areas, which exacerbates the problem, to your point. But I think that it's important that we have staff work with, Public Works, Engineering, you guys, on what kind of solutions we might be able to come up with, but we still are guided to some extent by a managed beach. So we've got to be careful about what we do in relationship to that too. So we've got some handcuffs on that we're not going to get out of.
And there are some other properties out there that are looking to expand or redevelop. The White Elephant restaurant, they'd like to build out their second and third floors, and we've heard of a rooftop bar. Right now, same thing. They don't even meet the parking they had. That building's been there since probably the 40s. It was an old Coast Guard building. So it's one of those situations. These buildings are old, they're pre-codes, and the area is very constrained as to what can be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can real estate, at the direction of the board, can they look for willing sellers that maybe we can do some parking pods in strategic locations down there? Because, we've done that on the access road because when Port Charlotte was developed along 41, none of those facilities meet parking requirements. None of them do. So one of the solutions was to have those pods to help alleviate those parking requirements. I'm almost wondering if, maybe there's a place over there that might be prime for acquisition to do parking pod. I don't know.
I had a property identified off island and was working with trying to get some shuttle stuff done with private folks, which you see Stumpy's out there running right now. It didn't get anywhere here, but it was a parcel that was just across the street, basically from the old bank on the corner. A little bit, I don't know if you know where the Wells Fargo, well, he's not Wells Fargo anymore. Key Agency, you've got the
I know that
barber shop, you got that, and then you had this, there was a development that was going to go in there that we looked at trying to make work, and we could have done stabilized grass parking and it's handicap accessible to stuff and all that, and it would have been a great place for overflow. The logistics didn't work out as well as we hoped. Now that property's been resold, and anything on the island is going to be extremely expensive, and it's got to be zoned appropriately, or we have to go through a zoning change.
Right. You would have to, again, with that prohibition about the parking not being allowed on any parcel except for the existing beach, except on public recreation lands.
Right. And we would have to make it public recreation to access if we put it on the beach side or do something.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the parking garage are prohibited unless we change the code.
Correct. You could instruct staff to make changes. That's
okay.
all
That's interesting. That's interesting because we have the existing footprint there. Do we take a portion of it and elevate our existing parking lot if we can get like sales tax funding and a future sales tax 6 years from now whenever we go out? And do we expand? Because even for people during high season to get to the beach, there's not enough parking. So do we expand our existing parking at the beach on our footprint that we have with some type of hybrid garage? I don't know, parking garage.
Again, that'll require a zoning change.
Yeah.
The overlay.
And I can tell you that the residents out there are they're very well organized and very vocal about wanting to keep the nature of the of that island as it currently stands. Rightfully so. It is one of Charlotte County's most pristine areas. So there would be a lot of most likely public opposition, but we are happy to move forward with
We've gotta
whatever
figure
you would
something
like
out.
to do.
There's opposition to not doing anything, and there's opposition to doing something.
Yes, sir.
So we've got to figure out as a board and take the shots for it. We don't have a choice.
I feel like I'm getting beat down every time I say something.
Sir,
I'm
I've been
just
beat
trying to
down
throw
by
out.
Minnesota Key for 10 years now.
Yeah. Well, you know, things have changed, and we talk about public safety too. I mean, at some point, you know, we need to be aware of what's going on there with public safety, and we're evolving. And, you know, maybe it takes a strategically planned facility there that can fit into the community. Anyway, just another thought. And, you know, I think, and I don't know if it's going to require direction and staff to do a community outreach like we did with the Port Charlotte Peach Complex to find out parking solutions and get some feedback and see what's on the table.
And if I can jump in with you, I don't disagree with that. I think that it'd be a good thing to do to have staff look at, with the administration's approval, but have staff look at what options are out there, all of them, anything. You know, you got to throw it on the wall and see what sticks, and then have the conversation with the people out there as to what alternatives are you interested in going after. How? Because we've got to address it. I mean, we've either got to put a garage out there, or we've got to start buying up properties so people can't take them over and do more parking on the beach and make the park bigger. I don't know what else what we do, but there's options out there, and I think we have to look at everything and then sit down with the folks, the stakeholders on the island, and have the discussion. It's the only way we get something done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was feeling alone.
No.
Thank you.
You can't not do anything. Yes, sir.
I agree with that. The direction today is let's just try to do the best we can at identifying all the options, even though they deviate from the code, because then we'll be able to identify what the code changes have to be and have those public discussions. But, yeah, I would support that. So you've got three of us, I guess, Hector, that say go, see what the options are.
Three of us that put our neck on the guillotine.
You got that right.
We'll look
worry,
at
I got your backs.
Yeah, we'll look at a workshop, down the road, but we'll get some options together. I anticipate we'll hear back from some of the folks out there that are aware of this going on, this starting conversation going on. So, thank you.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. With that, we're going to move to our Little Gasparilla Island presentation. Another unique island.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Claire Jebb, Assistant County Administrator. I'm going to kick this off and just run through some of the slides, and then I'm going to hand over to the experts to talk about some of the different areas that we're talking about today. The aim of this is really just to give you an overview of Little Gasparilla Island, what revenue we generate from Little Gasparilla Island, and what services we have out there, and also talk a little bit about the community planning process that happened a few years ago. So this is just a high-level overview of where Little Gasparilla Island is. And then the next slide shows you the percentage of developed and vacant land. So you can see we're about 70% built out in that area. We still have 28% of vacant land, and we have some preservation out there and conservation. In terms of ad valorem revenues, they have a taxable value of $184 million. We get general fund millage of $398,000 annually, and capital projects millage of $233,000 annually, which is the total of $631,781. So that's the revenue that we're bringing in from Little Gasparilla Island. There is other revenue coming in terms of tourist development tax, but that has to be spent on specific areas and not as part of the ad valorem budget. You know that. We also have a fire assessment out there, so there is a total revenue of $222,849 for fire assessment, and that's the first area I'm going to go through, is the public safety component. So they have their own fire rescue service, the Little Gasparilla Island Fire Rescue, and that provides the primary fire and medical response to the residents of LGI through the staffing of one firefighter paramedic. We, the county, we supplement their response as needed. So if they need additional help from the mainland. We help with that. We also pay them $30,000 a year to supplement their medical program, and they pay us $15 a month for a total of 3 radios. So we have that connectivity and that communication. And this is just an illustration of the calls that we get, the ones that we respond to and help on Little Gasparilla Island. So you can see for fire, it's 14, 6, 5, and 6 for the last 4 years. EMS is 10, 13, 13, and 7 for the last 4 years. So we do have some aspect of our services is being provided out there to supplement the authority that they have out there. So then running into community services, there are no parks on the island, but we do provide many services out there, including monthly breeding shorebird nesting surveys, GPS sea turtle nests. We also look at tag furniture that's been left on the beach per the sea turtle ordinance. We do annual nighttime lighting inspections to make sure the lighting is compliant. We do a pre-season mailer and goodie bags dropped off to the condos for sea turtle and shorebird season to make sure that people that are coming into that area are aware of the regulations. And we also do regular permit reviews and coastal lighting inspections for development through permitting. That is funded primarily through the permitting system. So now let's hand over to Scott, who's going to take you through the mosquito control operations that we have. Sorry, John.
Again, Commissioners, John Elias for the record, Public Works Director. Scott put this amazing presentation together, and I'm just going to briefly go through some of the mosquito control services we provide out on the island. So I won't read this, but basically we do provide mosquito control operations out there. We don't do advanced scheduling because we treat based on the surveillance, and we talk about that, like all areas of the county, one of the things we get is why don't we spray more, why don't we do more? A lot of times we're limited by the control of the product that we're allowed to put in the environment. That plays into it, as well as weather patterns, wind, rain, all that definitely has contributes to the type of missions and how often we can run missions. So the area, as Claire mentioned, it's a bridgeless barrier island, only accessible by boat. There's only dirt trails or paths in a total treatable area of about plus or minus 200 acres. These are the main mosquitoes that we treat out there, the black salt marsh mosquito and the eastern salt marsh mosquito. They are long-range flyers that also impact the Cape Page Peninsula. This talks about fiscal year 2021. We put about a little over 3,500 pounds of product out there for a total cost of $23,000. And the year to date, we've put 910 pounds of product for $11,375, and the approximate cost per treatment is approximately $1,100. Talks about their adulticide missions here, how many we've flown. We are finding an uptick in general just in our missions. The seasons are lasting longer, and we're finding that not just here, but in a lot of places throughout the county. Average 22 missions per season on LGI, with approximately 1 mission per week at around 1,900. The factors that we run into and the challenges we have are obviously weather. The crews must cross Placida Harbor by boat in the dark, and there, of course, the evening thunderstorms and high winds. It's also a very vacation-oriented island, so we have to work around residents and visitors that are out for a sunset stroll. We also have overtime and seasonal employee issues that we deal with, and the inability to plan missions ahead. Same-day surveillance and other inhabited barrier islands nearby are left untreated because we don't treat those areas. So those are some of the challenges we have. This is just a summary. This is what we do out there, and we're always looking to reduce costs for adulticide missions with the application and use of more granular larvicide applications to try to kill the mosquitoes before they ever get to the adult stage. So that good.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I noticed, so 23,000 spent the year prior for 3,600 pounds, only 900 pounds, 11,000. So year to date, we've put down less, but it's costing more per pound, isn't it? So that, because I can just tell the numbers are up.
All of our products throughout the industries have gone up, including mosquito control products. Very difficult to even acquire sometimes.
But I guess, is this am I reading this right, that maybe the majority of when we're putting the stuff down is more in the middle of the rainy season, so we're about to put a lot more stuff down? I see Scott easing toward the microphone.
That's typically, but again, what we've noticed, a trend upward in the last couple of years, is that we're doing more cycles and applying more product off-season, which is overall raising the budget for our materials, as well as the cost of materials due to the crisis that we're in have went up exponentially as well.
Right, but doing the off-season treatments does help to decrease the in-season issue, correct?
Larvicide, if we can get out there and do larvicide, it does.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, the larvicide missions. Yep. And then you do 22 helicopter missions per season?
I think we're talking 22 total. That would include the four-wheelers that we have out there, however we have to do with the adulticide. Let's go.
If I could, Scott Sherman, for the record, Mosquito Control Director. You kind of caught us in the middle with the adulticide, because what we're trying to do is put down granular adulticide, which has a longer lasting control factor, whereas before we used the liquid larviciding. So when you look at it, yes, the number of pounds that we put down is costing more, but it's giving us a better control for a longer length of time than we would be doing otherwise.
Right, so the application itself, a single application might cost more money, but you're not going to have to do a lot of the other stuff, and the overall costs will be lower with more effective strategy.
That's the theory.
Okay.
That's.
No, I like that. I like that theory.
That's the theory. With the adulticide missions, it's a combination of both. We find that actually ground treatments out there are more effective. Trying to get a plane in the air using even the wingman, we have to worry about the drift, we have to worry about the weather. It is a difficult situation. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible, and we have done it, and that's a credit to the pilots that they can do that. But in general, we would prefer to put two people out on the island with the ATVs and the foggers on the back. Right. That includes, obviously, the more expensive product is the adulticide product, plus the different labor costs depending on somebody who's been here 10 years versus 4 years, and whether they're on overtime status and so forth. So take these numbers with a little bit of a wave.
I appreciate that, and I did really quick math. So if I'm saying $25,000 for the larvicide product, that's not even talking about the labor, correct? That's just the product.
Right.
Yeah, and then the 22 missions, I mean, we're talking at least about $70,000 plus. So what are we dropping on the island, about $100,000 in mosquito control?
No, I think it's more, I would say it's about 40,000 plus another 10, I'd say somewhere around 60 to be.
60, okay, 60, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. And still good morning, Commissioners. Sean Cullinan, Planning Zoning Official. I'm going to go over the LGI Land Use and LGI Community Plan. So in November of 2002, the LGI Steering Committee was formed to evaluate matters affecting the island. That included staff as well as stakeholders on the island. March of 2004, the findings were presented to the board, and subsequently the LGI Advisory Committee was established to create a community plan for the island. In September of 2005, HDR Engineering, a consulting company, was hired to assist the advisory committee to formulate the vision and draft a community plan, and in October of 2007, that was accepted by the board. The big focus of the community plan dealt with land use, the natural environment, infrastructure, and public facilities and services. One of those things was to secure a mainland site to serve future parking and boat launching opportunities, as well as preservation of native habitats, dealing with density, land use issues, and based off of that, a code was created. So on July 23rd, 2013, the board adopted the Bridgeless Barrier Island, the BBI zoning district, and then on July 23rd, they also adopted the Little Gasparilla Island zoning district. Now, BBI covers all of the Bridgeless Barrier Islands. Gasparilla Island zoning district is unique to just Little Gasparilla Island. And then on that same date, there was a rezoning for all properties with the exception of existing PDs, environmentally sensitive lands, and the existing passenger vehicle barge landing. That is commercial tourist. On July 20th, the board approved, of 2010, the board approved the future land use map amendment, amending the properties on LGI to coastal residential as part of our large-scale Charlotte 2050 plan. So the original Little Gasparilla Island zoning district overlay required that the advisory committee review all applications for special exception uses. That was then later looked at by the county attorney's office, and as special exceptions are quasi-judicial, that requirement was deleted by the board in 2018. The LGI advisory committee is currently inactive. So again, the primary concern at that time, and still today, is securing mainland site. The Placida expansion parcel is not a suitable option, and, oh, this is yours, isn't it? Sorry, Claire.
That's okay. Sean said it. It's already been determined by coastal engineering that the Placida expansion parcel is not a suitable option for a barge landing, and that leads to, should you choose to do anything, purchasing development of an alternative site would be very costly. So we're really just looking for some input and any questions you may have.
Commissioner DeSeo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is interesting. Very unique situation with the barrier islands. What's the role of government and what do we provide for services? One could make the argument that, well, you moved out there. There was always one private sole option for your barging of materials and vehicles or access back and forth. So that was known. So you took the risk and purchased out there. Is it now government's problem to figure out how to fix a parking problem and barge problem? On the flip side, they have an advisory committee that for a very long time they identified potential parking issues on the mainland as a problem. They pay taxes. How do we tax them and they don't have access to go out there should something happen to the marina? That hasn't happened yet. It could. Maybe it's just speculation. Right now, there's access. So is there an immediate need to do something now? Technically, I would say no. But my understanding is that marina is up for sale. Can staff confirm that?
We believe it is up for sale at the moment, yes.
Okay. You believe. But has it been listed?
I think it may have been listed with the broker, but I haven't seen the advert myself.
I was told yesterday it is listed, but I was also told a week ago that there were 2 offers.
Okay.
They're LOIs, they're not full offers.
And we don't know what the end user is going to do. We don't know if they're going to keep it as a marina, redevelop it. They'll run the numbers. Whoever's buying it, that'll tell you if they're a marina operator or a developer. Do you know what it was listed at?
No, I don't.
You know what? Okay, so we don't know any of that. I heard somebody said $30 million.
I've heard that number, but I wouldn't like to say that I know that for definite, but I have heard that number.
Okay, so what we're hearing is we believe there's multiple contracts out there. They have it listed, which means you have somebody who's motivated to sell. They've reached the point that it's time. What that number is, we don't know, but the fact that it's listed, there's an intent to sell and get rid of the property. So that's concerning now, because now that just raised the stakes a little higher, because if the person buying it is a developer, that will not be used potentially as a location to transport goods and services across. Then the question is, then what? You've already said that our expansion is not conducive to a barge because of environmental issues, I believe, at the time?
Correct. Michael Poff produced a memo dated July 14th, 2021, where he looked at this exact issue. Could a barge landing be sited at the Placida Park? And he determined it wasn't appropriate.
Well, we're probably one step closer to a crisis should this be sold and redeveloped and does not offer barge services to the residents out there. How do they pump their septics? How do they get their air conditioners fixed? How do they, life safety issues? How do you function without the ability to get vendors from the mainland over to the island? So what do we do? That's the question here. A very important one now that the property's listed. and there's 2 offers on it.
Bridge or a tunnel?
So, yeah, a tunnel.
If that's factual.
Yeah.
I'm propagating potential rumors, so.
Yeah, I've heard from a couple different sources it was listed. So we know it's out there to sell. We just don't know how motivated the seller is and where the price point is. But the fact that it's listed, it wasn't listed before, now we know, I think it's pretty sure it's listed. You know, so that's a potential problem unless the buyer is going to keep it as a marina with public access, because let's say they did want to keep it as a marina, it could be private. Nothing requires the buyers to offer barge services. The users, the people that are doing it now do it because it's part of their business model, I would assume, and that's a profit, a revenue stream for them. The next guy, it may not be. He may not want to deal with carting people across back and forth. So, you know, this is something that I think should be in the forefront here, and we need to start really talking about solutions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I have received an email from someone who identified a potential solution. I don't know that the board is interested in this, and I don't know if there's a way to make this work, but I will tell you that there's a property on Placida Road. I researched it yesterday. I'm assuming this is the one that he referred to because he didn't give me an address. It is owned by someone in Naples, and it is approximately, I need my glasses for this stuff, jeez. Let's see if I've got, it's a multifamily property, and it's RMF 10, so you can get, according to this, you can get 87 total. It's a pretty good sized parcel. I'm not sure the actual acreage, I haven't calculated, we can do that. But it looks like it's about 8 plus. And there's also 21 boat slips attached to it. My understanding, and I did not drive back out there yesterday to check it, but I believe it's on the market. I did not see it on LoopNet though, which I'm on right now trying to figure that out. I have no idea what they're asking for it. I don't know that the board's interested in this either. But there might be a conduit for us to be an assistant to the islanders in putting this together. But again, I don't, hang on here, it may be right there. No, that's not it.
You know if the spots are conducive to a barge as well? You said there's dock space that comes with it.
I don't believe it's conducive with a barge. Yeah. It backs up to Spyglass, and the owners own halfway into the canal on Spyglass. I think it would actually require for barge access to be dredged, widened, and because of the way that the area is built out, it's a basin, so there's really no place for a barge to go up in there unless it was, it could be developed, I think, into something for that. Again, I'm only bringing this up because I got this letter and I thought, well, I'm going to look at it and see, because there's got to be a solution to the problem. But what is government's role in this right now? My concern is this. Is we need to get equipment out there for an emergency, and we can't get it out there. My concern is where's the garbage going? How is it getting off the island? And all the other things that I brought up, septic yesterday in a conversation with somebody. How do they get their septic tanks pumped out? There's a lot of things that are concerning about public safety issues out there, and I mean, I'm not sure what our role is, but I think we can be a conduit for a solution, even if we're not the ultimate solution.
Yeah, and I think also, does the county have the ability, if we were to go out and identify a piece of property, as Commissioner Truitt, let's assume this is a possible solution, do you set up an MSBU for their specific use, and then there's a funding source there?
We would have to investigate the options there and see whether that's a feasible.
Because it wouldn't be open to the public, that would be for the residents' use for their specific benefit.
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Doyle's in the queue, then I'll come to you, sir.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree. Let's just the role. It's cloudy, but I think we do have these needs for primarily, in my mind, the barge landing situation. Parking, that's a whole different story. But getting emergency vehicles and other types of equipment out there, that really has to be a priority. I did have a conversation with an individual. I gave the information, part of the information. I didn't leave all of it with me, to administration yesterday. I understand and I respect, highly respect, Coastal Engineering's determination, that it's impossible to incorporate a barge landing in our current plan for the Placida expansion. But I really would appreciate understanding from Michael Poff. I have some experience in all this. I need to understand exactly, technically, scientifically, what the problem is. This individual believes he can do it.
Yeah, and if I can jump in on this for a point of information, I believe it was the conflict of the existing private barge landing conflicting with our ramp and having another barge landing there. I would think that was our conversation, Claire. Is that what was?
I'm just scrolling to the piece. What Michael said in
And
his
if it goes away, it may not be a problem anymore. That's.
All I'm saying, instead of getting an answer right now, I just need to get exactly, technically, scientifically, all the things relative to environmental permitting, why we couldn't incorporate. I understand it might necessitate a change in the design, and I really like the design we have right now. But we have such a tremendous potential need for a barge landing. If there is a possible solution on our piece of property, I need to know that. And if it means a design change, what are the adverse impacts created from doing that? That's all I'm saying. And it may be that it's not worth that, consideration. But I don't know that detailed conversation with this I want that individual really to be lined up with Mr. Poff to understand. That's really what I'm talking about. And then we see what the answer is. But I like the idea of researching this piece of property and seeing if we can be a conduit for some way. How it's financed, it's a whole different story. Thank you, sir.
If I could just add, based on your comments at the April 12th board meeting where we went through the design for Placida, we're now moving into permitting. So any changes to that would be fairly significant.
Yes, sir.
I totally understand that, but we have such a big potential problem on Little Gasparilla if we don't find some solution. That's all clear. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, I totally respect that, but it may have to be a timeout.
Commissioner Constance?
Thank you, sir. Well stated. I agree with you, Commissioner Doherty. I don't know. I was looking and I found something at 1900 Wisconsin Avenue, but that looks like it's under contract. That wasn't it?
No, it's down south from there. It's 8500 Placida Road.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can staff confirm, just maybe report back at one-on-ones, number one, confirm it is in fact listed, confirm what is the actual listing price of Eldridge Marina?
We can do that, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments? All right, very good. With that, then we will move into our discussion on accessory dwelling units. And good morning. It's still morning. Good morning.
It is still morning. Good morning. For the record, Carrie Walsh, Director of Human Services. Today we're going to talk a little bit about affordable housing, a little bit of a need going on in the community right now, and then we're going to focus in on some specific strategies, specifically accessory dwelling units. These are the key points of our discussion today and our time together. We're going to review kind of the situation that we're in our community, even though as soon as I'm done saying the words, it may be changing. This is a crazy environment that we're in. And then we're going to talk about some additional strategies that you may want to consider, and also that missing middle or the ADU pilot program. I want to remind you, just going back to the report that was published in 2018 by Together Charlotte, in which it was through research, by 2025, Charlotte County needed to add almost 11,000 housing units to keep pace with projected demand. And of those 11,000, about half, about 5,500 of those should be quote unquote affordable for those earning 80% or less of the area median income. As always, I think it's helpful to inform everyone when we say affordable housing. Essentially what we mean is 30% of the household income is the useful cap for what is considered affordable for a household. Cost burden is when a household is paying more than 30%, and extreme cost burden is when a household is paying more than 50%. 40% of the households in Charlotte County are considered financially unstable. I would venture to say that the coronavirus and the pandemic and inflation and cost of food and gas has put us in an even more dire situation. Just to give you a sense of, not that you're not well aware of the environment that we're in, at a certain point, according to the Charlotte Sun, home prices in Punta Gorda and Northport region, we were leading all other metro regions in the nation in terms of home prices. I inserted this slide just to give you a sense. I know that it is not lost on you, but those folks that are considered ALICE, which is the asset limited, income constrained, employed, which is those living above poverty, but not quite making ends meet. When you think about those that are above or below the ALICE threshold, the pandemic was disproportionate in its impact. And so those folks that are below the ALICE threshold have really struggled significantly more than those above. This is just to give you a sense of the absolute craziness, the Wild West that has been going on in terms of median house prices. These are our sold prices for nearby counties. You can see that we've seen over 30% growth, and then now apparently things are going to shift again, but it's important to kind of capture some of this for you. And this is the median sold price by bedroom count. So it also gives you an idea that, the one bedrooms saw a really sharp rise as well. This information, I wish the new 2022 numbers were published after I created this slide for you, which have seen an increase, but it gives you a sense of what this looks like in terms of income and housing. So when we look at labels, a lot of times when we talk about affordable housing, that can become confusing. There can become people put together, workforce housing, and that's not affordable housing, and what all that means. So this slide can give you a good idea. You can see that workforce, that would be considered in green, moderate, low income, that sort of thing. So it's just a good reference for us in our conversation. I want to remind you of the Affordable Housing Toolkit that we put together with the task force, and we had some very concrete strategies. I want to remind you about how we have attacked this issue. So within the very specific strategy of planning and zoning, we have looked at and made changes to the comprehensive plan. We have looked at mixed-use zoning. Reviewing incentive density and then outreach amongst residents to talk about density. Our density cap is one of the most confusing things in the whole world. So I think the more education, the better, including for all of us. I would absolutely include myself in that. So that's an ongoing strategy. But then you'll see then developing a strategy to address missing middle. That's in black. That's part of our conversation today. We really feel that that is a great strategy to employ, but it's going to take an awful lot of different approaches to be able to make a dent. The policy for incentive density with criteria and award amounts, that's part of our Charlotte Home program, and that is an award-winning program. We're very proud of that, and we have been able to use that, as well as that same process for our local government area of opportunity funding. We have implemented a process for the transfer of properties. That is a cyclical process that we partner with Real Estate Services, and we do have pre-qualified nonprofits. We have expanded the scope of our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to really lead the discussion of affordable housing, and they've done a terrific job. In terms of potential projects and partnerships, you'll see here that we did take the opportunity zones off of the list as a potential project. Nothing ever really came through on that. Nothing ever really made sense in terms of the way that those were located in our community. It was a rather confusing rollout, so we took that off. The Bachman Tract, that will be coming before you all. That may be a good use of some ARPA funding. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that because you will get some detailed information about that coming soon. And then we are obviously always working with our partners, public-private partners, and looking for creative solutions, which really is what this is going to come down to. On this one, I do want to pull out specifically just to talk for a minute. We have not found a reoccurring source for our housing trust fund. However, what I would say is, in the scheme of things, we may be able to put a pin in that for a minute. We have received some other funding. Specifically, we just received $1.5 million in program income due to the sale, due to Charleston K. They paid off their SHIP loan and their HFSP loans, which totals $1.5 million, which we will be able to use and utilize to incentivize and create affordable housing. We've also recently received large SHIP allocations, $1.2 million and $1.8 million. So there's $3 million in SHIP money that we are going to be able to use. We have the ability to tap into those state funds. We always try and use those funds first and then tap into local funds. We do have some projects that will be coming forward to you to tap into those trust fund uses, specifically the verandas. I do want to remind you, though, with those SHIP funds, we do have those set-asides. With SHIP funding, there is a requirement that 65% of your allocation be used for home ownership activities. One of the things that I've been speaking with CAM about is really allowing our Affordable Housing Committee, and therefore you, as a body, to be able to better determine what those set-asides should be, that we should be able to control how much of those dollars get spent on home ownership versus rental activities. It does tie our hands pretty significantly. So some funding strategies for you for consideration to increase affordable housing. Investing in shovel-ready projects is clearly one that we think would be a good idea. Subsidizing construction costs for accessory dwelling units. If you do decide to do that, that may be something that we can absolutely look at with the condition that we could front some of those funds, obviously, in terms of a loan, a forgivable loan, and then we can make sure that that unit is habitable and make sure that it's safe, and also require that there's monitoring to ensure that that unit is held affordable, that sort of thing. Once you hear more, and Sean will tell you a little bit more about that. Purchase land or develop properties for affordable housing to nonprofits. We still feel that that is a great way to increase and to leverage our housing partners. And investing capacity building for some of our partners that are trying to build and become community land trusts and focus in on housing. It's a difficult thing to do, and so that may be a good way for us to leverage those funds. Another opportunity may be the landlord risk mitigation. We may also be able to front load and loan some money to potential landlords with the idea that they could have that forgivable loan and then be able to repay it as they keep that affordable, or it could be a forgivable loan. So totally up to you. Some additional strategies. Obviously, we've been having conversations about the crunch and the crisis that we're in. We've had those conversations with the sheriff and with the community and with, realtors, and everyone is talking about this. Some possibilities could be master leasing, or it's also known as a buy down, where potentially you are purchasing large-scale leases, and then you are the ultimate leaseholder then, and then you can determine your own price that you are setting for those folks. So it could absolutely be a much more affordable rate. A landlord registry. We don't know how many rentals we have in our community. And I will say it is difficult to wrap our arms around the depth and breadth of the problem when we don't know. An inordinate amount of landlords have cashed out in this environment, and so it has exacerbated our issue, but we still don't know. Increasing wages. That's an obvious one, but that's also a solution. and also subsidizing or providing childcare. I know that it doesn't feel as though that's in the bailiwick of affordable housing, but childcare, our workforce, we have a small workforce, it is limited, and they tend to be the folks that have children and are paying for childcare, and it is cost prohibitive in many ways for families to do that. So all of these are just some ideas for your consideration and conversation. And then it's Sean, but before Sean, if anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
You're the cue.
I think you forgot to take me out.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I got Commissioner Constance, so.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So your last slide, Carrie, really commendable. I really love the idea about the master leasing because I think we as government, and I'm going to use it very broadly, school board, and even some of the industries, I think you could probably put into that as well, whether it's a distribution company or one of the larger employers. Part of this is attracting employees, but it's also retaining employees. And I'm going to keep repeating it over and over because I think it's really, really important, and it has definitely gained traction. When you talk to folks about it, the light bulb goes off and they say, wow, what a great idea, because if you can keep them here, because when they go try to get better pay, when they look at the housing opportunities where the better pay is, they say, I can't afford the salary increase. It's crazy. So I think that's great. And I do really think your bullet point about subsidizing childcare is right on the money, because so much money gets spent on childcare that if you can provide it or subsidize it, that's so much more money that could go to the rent. So please, thank you for bringing that forward, because I think that last bullet is something that we've really got to try to work on, because there have to be options, and maybe it involves Cultural Center 2.0. Maybe it involves trying to get a lot of the seniors in the area to maybe get interested in volunteering some time to help out. And if you can multiply that ability to take care of kids, which can really be a lot of fun, and not all day long, 5 days a week, but for a couple of hours. If you got an army of people that want to come in and do a few hours each, it's joyful, and it helps those kids understand that old folks are really kind of cool and teach us things. I don't know. We're on to something here, and I really want to see you take that bullet point and run with it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm part of regional workshops being on the Affordable Housing Committee. They're hosted by the Florida Finance Corporation, and I sit with a mix of counties, large, small, and you kind of get a sampling of what we're all going through. So one of the reoccurring themes that I kept hearing is how these other counties are using the ARPA funds for affordable housing. And we've been so constrained with guidance from, very conservative guidance from our consultant and staff, which I appreciate. But yet these other municipalities and counties are out there spending the money on affordable housing. So I kept coming back to staff saying, what's going on here? I think it's been for a couple of months. So at my last workshop, there was a slideshow that just bullet pointed all the uses of the money for affordable housing that we're not doing. So staff went back and looked at it with our consultant, and there is some more flexibility there in how we can use the funds based on Treasury guidance. But I just felt like we're late to the party in terms of uses of the funds. So I believe there may be $7 to $8 million of funds left unallocated or unidentified for other uses. So then there's timing issues for the use of the funds and how quickly they can be spent. But the uses are so broad that it says it could be used for the purchase of land and construction. So you can literally build affordable housing units with this money. But I don't want to be building government housing or managing that. I don't see that as my role here. There's other people like the Punta Gorda Housing Authority. They're here today. They do things like that. So is there some type of partnership element with an existing organization like the Housing Authority that we can participate more aggressively with developers? There was a time when this board voted for a low interest loan, $1.2 million. That deal fell through. Well, now we have more flexibility with the amount of money, and will that be enough to get somebody to step up to the plate that we can partnership, assuming we want to use more of that money towards affordable housing. So that may be a really large opportunity here. I'm not saying all the money, but we certainly have the discretion now and the ability based on the consultant and Treasury that we can get more aggressive. You know,
I heard all the money. That's not.
yeah, I know. I'm trying to tamp things down here. I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, or
Okay, yeah.
you know, because we don't know what we don't know. I've said that before. We don't know what's going to pop up with county needs between now and then that the funding may be eligible to cover. But I'm just saying it's there now. We can use more of it than what we originally thought. In terms of childcare, yeah, you know, I had to pay for 4 kids in childcare. It is expensive, but this is not a reoccurring source of funding. So what happens if you start rolling out a program to pay for childcare and it's only good for a year? Has that helped that person? Maybe for the year, but it's not reoccurring. You know, the housing, if we spend it, can be reoccurring housing as people have the ability, if it's based on affordability, as people move up and they don't qualify for the affordable housing because they've made more money, then the next guy gets to go in. So it's kind of a rotating thing where it worked for some people, maybe for a couple of years, then they move on and the next guy moves in. So that's reoccurring to me. And you know, so I just wanted to throw that out there. I know, I assume staff is talking to everybody at one-on-ones and maybe have clarified some of those things with the ARPA funding. I don't know. I've been keenly focused on it, so I've been getting briefs from staff quite regularly. We're going to go through the Affordable Housing Committee to make recommendations. But since it's on here, I wanted to kind of, I don't know if I jumped the gun because it did go, you know, we didn't make a recommendation yet, but it's out there and we should all start thinking about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Deutsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, there's no question that Charlotte County has a major housing crisis. Sarasota County has a housing crisis. Lee County has a housing crisis. Florida has a housing crisis. This little number 5 item on our agenda probably is one of the most significant things we're going to be dealing with in a long time. And when originally I saw accessory dwelling units on the agenda, I thought we were going to be addressing the situation that I assume you guys are all aware of. We've been dealing with in Grassy Point for almost a year now, where someone took a shed without a permit. They advertised it on Airbnb and was renting it out at $200 a night with no proper hygiene facilities, and it became an issue. The decision we have to make in dealing with the housing crisis right now is to face and accept the reality of what's happening in Charlotte County. We have people living in tents. We have people living in trailers. We have people living in mobile homes. We have people obviously living in sheds, boats, and pickup trucks. Is that the way that we're going to deal with the housing crisis? What we're talking about today is the housing crisis and meeting the housing needs of the people in our community. But we're also talking about the quality of the community. What do we want to do? Do we want to allow a residential 80 by 125 lot to have a shed in the backyard and rent it out to a couple people? Or make a little bit bigger shed and rent it out to 3 or 4 folks because we need a place for housing? That's part of the issues we have to talk about. Do we want minimum housing to go out and find people living in tents and trailers and mobile homes and sheds because they don't meet code? Is it a health issue? Is it a public safety issue? This is a big issue. This is a major issue. Yeah, we're working on housing things. Each one of us, I'm sure, is doing it individually. I've met with probably 8 or 10 different people in the last 6 months on conceptual ideas for housing. We talked about potential people that are coming into the community with business to provide workforce housing to encourage our employees here. We've talked about taking a model which might have been considered a hotel-type operation, an extended stay operation, where we would contract with a business, let them rent out the units and make them available to their employees. There are a lot of options out there, but we've got to take a look at every one. We have to see which one will work best, which one will meet the needs of our community, and which one will be consistent with our perception of the quality of life in our community. Everyone talks about the fact that we need housing. And when push comes to shove, and if we accept the reality of it, when we get away from the big meetings and you sit down in the coffee shop or across the kitchen table, everyone says, yeah, we need it. But it's probably the best classic example of the NIMBY attitude I've seen anywhere. It's great, but not in my backyard. So this board, we have to accept the challenge and decide what do we want to do about the housing. And specifically, as I look at the agenda item, what do we want to do about accessory units? Do we want to take that 8x10 shed that's now stopped? And we couldn't find a way to stop it. They had a hose out there. They had a shower. They had a kitchen sink and a pottage on. So if the people came in and rented it for 2 days, obviously we know where the shower went, and I'm not sure what everyone does in a shower, and I wouldn't even go there, but the kitchen sink gave out gray water. That was going into the yard. So the question I have, what happened to that porta-john? Did the guy take it with him when he was through renting? Did he dump it in the owner's pool? Did it go in the canal? And they got shut down because it was a public health issue. I understand the person feels he's legally allowed to do it. He's going to come back and build another shed and get a permit and rent it out. I don't think it's irrelevant that it's in Grassy Point, that it's a $1 million house neighborhood. I don't know if his neighbors love him or hate him or think it's a great idea or a bad idea, but those are some of the things that we've really got to take a look at. This housing issue is in front of us. It's a challenge that we have to face. And we're trying all different things and all different kinds of directions, and something's going to stick. But I think we have to make a decision, and we have to deal with. Do we want to encourage and or allow, or what are we going to do about the folks living in tents, trailers, pickup trucks, mobile homes, boats? That's a challenge we have to face, Mr. Chair, and I think we have to address it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Constance.
Getting back to the child care issue, Commissioner DeSeo, I get what you're saying, but I also think that it gives us an opportunity to develop the program so that it can move on its own. I mean, I think if we're really good at establishing where there's not a high cost for labor, because, you know, I think it's been a little while since you paid for child care, but child care is incredibly expensive. $200, maybe $300 a week sometimes. That's $1,200 a month. That's a rent payment. Or that'll get you from a meager residence to a place where it's actually livable for your family. So again, I applaud Carrie for putting that as that fourth bullet. It should be the first bullet. It really should.
Well, and if I can jump in on that, the comment that you made, Commissioner Constance, in reference to the Cultural Center, one of the ways the government can help out without getting into recurring funding per se is providing space. Right. Helping them build a program, providing space, because my business office is next door to the child daycare center. And it's an old house, you know, that they've fixed up, and they have toys all over the backyard, and they run a lot of people through the program in a not very large setting. We have an opportunity to put them in potentially a better setting with the right trained people to manage a program and potentially, like you said, bring in some volunteers that could help and assist in that limits the amount of money that we actually have to utilize from taxpayer dollars.
And if I can, sir, I appreciate that, because you're spot on. You know, going a step further, so maybe with ARPA funding we pilot it, but then there's other grant funding that's going to be recurring specifically for child care that we can access. And if it's not the community foundation, it's somebody else, whoever that quarterback is for getting that program going, they'll be good stewards of showing, hey, we took this amount of money and we helped these many people. great track records is what Charlotte County is all about. And I just think we have the potential to do so much better here. Our senior population is actually getting younger because we're bringing in more and more folks that are newly retired. So I just think the potential is really there. And maybe it wasn't there 10 years ago, maybe it wasn't 5 years ago, maybe today's the day. You know, and I want to explore that possibility.
Yeah, and I'm not against it. Okay. I was bringing up the fact that, hey, just remember, once you start a program, it's hard to stop. And what happens when the ARPA money dries up that we were using as our sole source? So, yeah, anything's possible with the understanding of what's that reoccurring funding source, or is it a limited program, you know, for just a short period of time and that's it? Because, you know, you look, you know, we just heard that the numbers here in Charlotte County. Do you know how many people in Charlotte County are going to jump on a program to have their child care paid for? The money will evaporate probably in 1 year. I'm telling you right now.
But I think I don't know what you're envisioning. I'm not envisioning totally free. They're going to have to show us what their tax returns are. You know, they're going to have to show need. And
you will have plenty of need demonstrated in Charlotte County. I can tell you that right now, all the single moms. I sit on the Community Action Agency. This is what we talk about all the time. I'm telling you right now, we have a free lunch program in all of Charlotte County because our numbers pass the threshold. For everybody, every single school in Charlotte County, you get free breakfast and lunch because we qualify.
I know, I get that. And
the same will happen for child care.
But it just speaks to the fact that it's so needed.
No, and I don't disagree. I mean, there's a lot of needs in Charlotte County. Child care is just one of them. And what's our role? We had a discussion earlier. What's the role of government? You know, and if we want that to be a priority of the board, then we're responsible for figuring out funding sources.
Totally
and number one, to what extent are we going to do that? And I don't disagree with the campus at the Cultural Center. That's a unique location. We've been waiting for a while. It's coming back here at the end of the month, I believe. We're going to get an update from the Community Foundation on where they are in the process. But yeah, that whole campus is like a blank slate, you know, what we can do there. Maybe there'll be one smaller building with flex space to meet all the needs, and then we'll have a couple acres left over for other things. And to your point about how we partner and people want space, look at the Family Services Center. That is the model of taking tax dollars, putting nonprofits in there, and stretching that dollar tenfold, whatever the number was, because you've got the nonprofits providing the services that government would have to pay for. And that's why they're there, and we share that space. So, yeah, we've done it. We've got a track record of that. So if there's a way to partner and solve the child care problem, I'm all ears. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Just add it to the list. If I may, just to reiterate what you were saying, we have 6 nonprofits and community organizations that have formally requested to be on the waiting list to be considered for the Family Services Center if space ever opens up. Well, that's already booked up.
Yeah.
So this is already, I mean, this is done. But I will say this, just in regard to adding, you know, more conversation to the need of childcare, not to get too far off of accessory dwelling units. Sorry, Sean. But I will say that when we have been developing our process for the individual assistance portion of ARPA funding, one of the things that we were looking to do was to look for ways to support the community with employment supports, and childcare falls into that of employment and childcare, so it's helpful on a couple of different levels. We've been working with the Early Learning Coalition, who have a program that subsidizes childcare for those folks that are living at 150% or less of the federal poverty level. Currently, they have what they call a reverse waiting list, where they have 236 children that are qualified at that income level, but there are not enough providers. And so one of the ways that we're looking to invest some of those dollars, and it's still going to administration and Neighbors Giblin, is to support those businesses that want to develop a home-based child care center, and what that would take for them to get their licensure and mentoring and help through the Early Learning Coalition. They have a business development network where they would provide those supports. We lost a lot of child care providers in the pandemic, and obviously during the Great Resignation, right, because of wages. So this is a very complicated gray issue, but I think you're all absolutely correct. The need is clear.
Commissioner Doherty?
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to weigh in and say that I am in support of the conversation. We need every tool in the toolbox to fight this crisis. That's the bottom line. Providing child care, if that's feasible, at the cultural center campus, I'm for looking into it. Obviously looking into it, figuring out how that would all work. Also, I would appreciate a briefing, Hector, on ARPA fund. I did not know that we had that flexibility. And I haven't done my own research on it, but I would like a briefing on that. The key is there's a clock ticking on the utilization of those dollars. So we've got to move. Bottom line is we got to figure out something that if we're going to use part of that money, we got to figure out how to use it and quickly. And the crisis is here. We need to find quick solutions. So I'm in support of that too, just to find out what we can do and how quickly we can do it.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Just to answer that question about more information, the FAC conference we're going to, they have a specific workshop, and that's why I'm going this year, just because when I saw the agenda, it's on the utilization and use of the ARPA money in our local communities.
I saw that yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
So I'll be at that. I just want to make sure if you're going that you hit that workshop.
I can tell you, I was just in D.C., last week, and this was a big topic. Big topic. All across the country, people are talking about this. Mr. Cullen.
Thank you. Good afternoon now. Sean Cullinan, Planning Zoning Official. Fourth item that I'm speaking about today. Now we're going to talk about some strategies we have devised from planning and zoning for your discussion. So we're looking to address the missing middle with accessory dwelling units. This will help address multi-generational housing needs. It could increase financial stability for homeowners, and it adds affordable housing units to the community. Now, it's not all roses. We all know that. We do have a number of policies established in the comp plan and the TDU code related to affordable housing and workforce housing. We have been certificating density, which can be used for county-initiated or approved affordable housing or workforce housing projects. One policy with administration's blessing that we have instituted is anytime we rezone a county-owned property, plan amendment and rezone, we sever off that density to put into a separate bucket that does not fall under the incentive density restrictions. Still falls under other TDU restrictions and allowances, but it just gives us another bucket of density to be able to use for projects. And again, this will also help to address multi-generational families and households. We're seeing a lot more of that as people may have lost their jobs and have moved back in with their parents or with their children. So here are just some examples of what people think of when they think of accessory dwelling units: detached, attached. These are very common up where most of us are probably from. You'd have a mother-in-law suite over the garage. You'd have a separate, smaller, one-bedroom, living space behind the house. It could be lots of different things. Here, basement conversion doesn't necessarily work, but again, there's not really specifics to Florida. It's just generalized. You've got converted garages, you've got a specific detached ADU that looks like a separate house, and you've got an attached accessory dwelling unit. Just some pictures of what these could look like. So we also looked at what are our neighbors doing. As you know, and I've beaten you folks over the head with it, we have a density issue. We have a capped density system, so if you're adding residential density, you have to take it from somewhere. Our incentive density, that density we're certifying off to use in other places. So what we're finding is the areas that do have accessory dwelling unit allowances, they're about 500 to 700 square foot structures. Single ownership, so the main household is the owner of the property. It's not condoed, it's not separate fee simple ownership, anything like that. So Punta Gorda has some allowances. It may be attached within or separate. No more than one accessory dwelling shall be permitted on a single deeded lot. The accessory dwelling unit shall not be served by a driveway separate from that. It's limited to 650 square feet of first floor area for the maximum footprint, or 50% of the first floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is greater. It may be combined with a garage, a workshop, a studio, any other similar use. And it must be located in the rear. Lee County also has it. They're not subject to density provisions except on Gasparilla Island. It does read a little bit odd. So a maximum of one accessory apartment as unit is permitted per principal single-family residence. They've got some parking standards. Again, they've got maximum floor areas, maximum lot coverages, minimum lot sizes, and appearance standards. So it has to be designed to retain the appearance of a single-family residence. So it's not just a shed that somebody puts back. We could look at standards for that if you so chose or not. Sarasota County, again, not permitted on barrier islands or within cluster subdivisions. Only one accessory dwelling unit. Main principal dwelling must be occupied by the property owner, maximum 750 square feet. Again, accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed the height of the principal structure, have similar architectural standards, very similar. So you can't really tell. City of Northport is going through the same exercise we currently are. They are currently evaluating various locations for inclusion into their land development regulations. So what staff has been banting about, and we know that there's an issue. We also know we're hamstrung by density, but this is what planners live for, is creativity and things like this. So what we've been banting about is to do code revisions to allow for affordable housing units to be constructed on any parcel of land zoned RSF 2 and RSF 3.5. It would be a pilot program. Obviously, the TDU code will still apply, so there are proper neighborhood framework map designations to be receiving zones. It would be one single family unit, no more than 750 square feet, or a duplex. You can make a duplex look like a single family residence these days. We've had a few folks that have, while they may not be considered duplexes, they have separate exterior access. So the county would utilize our incentive or other forms of county-owned density. Again, the density that we're severing off to put into a separate bucket, that would be controlled by either Allura or some other form of restrictive covenant, and we could utilize the Charlotte home process for the initial vetting. So we were looking at square footage standards, appearance, location, and any other such restrictions as you folks may want to look at. So these are the properties zoned RSF 2 and RSF 3.5. We know these colors wash out a bit, and we use the formal colors that are within the zoning code. Those are the formally adopted colors. That's why they are what they are. So you'll notice a few areas here that you would think, oh, wow, there's a lot of places. South Gulf Cove, deed restricted. That would supersede. Deep Creek, deed restricted, would supersede. Northwest Port Charlotte, managed neighborhood, not a qualified receiving zone. So just because these are RSF 2 and RSF 3.5 designated areas, that doesn't mean that all of these would qualify. Parkside area being a community redevelopment area, that would qualify. Some of the areas up here in the East Englewood area could potentially qualify. So by doing this as a pilot program to see how it would work, staff, we can utilize these frameworks and other items in order to limit it to see if it works, and then if you do, then maybe the instruction is to amend the comp planning code to further expand that use. With that, where do we want the pilot program? I will say that staff did broach this subject a number of years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, with the Parkside redevelopment area. With that neighborhood group, we had a number of charrettes where we did broach this. That is one of our older neighborhoods, one of our more lower cost neighborhoods where this type of pilot program could benefit from. Oddly, they were not in favor of it. They didn't want to have this ability to have these accessory dwelling units. That's not to say that that might not change. What standards would we look to? What community outreach would you like us to do? And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions, comments, concerns, throwing things at me.
No, we won't be throwing things today.
It's okay, you can.
Commissioner DeSalle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In Sarasota County, do you know what their experience model has been like with this? How many permits are being pulled for accessory dwelling units?
I don't have that data. I can look into that. I know this has not been in place up there for very long. It's only been put in place within the past couple of years.
Well, it's probably enough to see if somebody took advantage of it. I'm just curious to see, because they're a much bigger county, you would assume there's more participation in this. I'm just curious if you can get feedback from your counterparts. Has this been used? What have been the pros and cons? so we can learn from what they've done and not make the same mistakes twice. So, we have someone to look to.
Sir, I'd be happy to do that. This is one of those topics that, especially given our demographics, is polarizing. It's like chickens.
Yeah.
You've got people that love it and people that are adamantly against it. As Commissioner Constance used to love to say, we're so far behind the curve that we're now back ahead of it. So we can utilize those to see what works, what doesn't, now that those folks have put them in place for a couple of years. And I'd be happy to reach out and get you that information.
I mean, I could see this really working at the time of new construction. I mean, to try and shoehorn in an accessory dwelling unit, because now you have, how do you do the hookups and the sewer hookups and the electric? How do you do the service?
That is something that is going to need to be looked at, as well as setbacks, even if something is on septic and well.
Yeah.
If a house is sized for just that primary structure, this is looked at as affordable, but there are associated costs in increasing your septic, increasing your water or sewer capacity. Those are all things that if you instruct us to move forward, that we would work with Carrie's group with her money to try to find a way to maybe subsidize these and things like that.
Potentially what we had talked about was if people are willing to look at this and that there does need to be some upgrades in terms of their septic size or something, their drain field, that may be a SHIP loan, a forgivable loan, and then obviously then we're in there doing income verification and habitability and making sure that everything aligns, and then that's another affordable unit that is added to the mix, and then we can make sure that it's safe.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to understand how Sarasota was dealing with existing structures and if they're being permitted more for new structures or existing structures and how they overcame some of those obstacles, because it can be very cost prohibitive to try to put in a 500 square foot unit, yet it requires all the elements that a house would need. Like I said, the septic, I mean, try to redesign a septic after it's been in there for 15 years. I mean, it's near impossible. You're going to have to bring the whole thing up to standard. That's maybe $20,000, $30,000 with engineering, and even if you have the room, and then if you have a pool, I mean, to make it all work, and then the electric service, you're going to have to do an extended service or get a separate meter and either get underground service from the pole or overhead. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, I guess. That's why it was interesting when I'm reading that Sarasota's been doing it now for a number of years. And are people actually doing it? I just see this as a benefit really for new construction. I mean, that would be my time to go in there and lay it out.
But before I go get to Commissioner Doherty, we do a lot of garage additions, and they're unattached.
Detached, yeah.
They're detached garages. So when we do that, it's obviously you can always drop a sub panel over. And since we're talking about owned by the same property owner, they can just have 1 meter to do that.
Yeah, and then the sewer, though, they don't
put in bathing facilities. You're out working in your garage on your.
Yeah, but typically in the garage, you're not putting in a full bath or kitchenette, and you don't have sewer to worry about. Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. But usually you're thinking, the electric's not as much as a problem as it is really the sewer.
Right.
If it's sewer, it's less of a problem. If it's septic, it's a real problem.
Yeah.
So it would be a real unique situation to make it work. Doesn't prohibit us from trying. Because even if you can fill the niche for a handful of these, it may work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I apologize, Carrie. As we're also looking through with building code things, there are actually provisions in the building code which allow you to have, you to still live in an accessory dwelling unit, but have the kitchen and bathroom in the primary structure. So there are other provisions in there that may be helpful in this. Again, as I stated, this is all conceptual because we need to get your feedback on moving forward, and there are still some nuts and bolts to work out, and not everything is rosy. There are associated costs with this.
And I actually did one of those in Port Charlotte as well, where the parents moved in with the daughter, and we did an attachment on the back of the house. We had to put in a small lift station and grinder, and it was a septic field that had to be expanded. The tank was fine. But there's options for it. You just have to you're getting creative. People on the side of providing this have to get creative as well. Commissioner Doherty.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to, I agree with all the comments on infrastructure and things like that. I think where it might apply is, a lot of folks have more than one lot too. I mean, I own 3 lots. In my subdivision, you have deed restrictions, you can't do it there. But somebody like you, you would live in an area, maybe it would be a possibility if you own 2 lots and you wanted to build a detached garage or something of that nature. You might want to incorporate. I think it's potentially another tool for the toolbox. I do want to find out what's going on in Sarasota and possibly Lee to see what their track record has been. But you go back to that map. You said South Gulf Cove has deed restrictions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, General Development had deed restrictions, but they all evaporated in 1991. So that's why I'm curious. The homeowners association out there may have something.
It's voluntary in South Gulf Cove.
Yeah.
But they have architectural review requirements.
Architectural review, okay.
Which it's kind of odd, but what you see out there, but yes.
Okay.
And we also, again, the various frameworks, the various coastal high hazard areas, that's why we're looking at the pilot, because we still have those.
Northwest Port Charlotte, what was the issue up there?
Northwest Port Charlotte is a managed neighborhood. That does not qualify to be a receiving zone. Managed neighborhoods. Northwest Port Charlotte is actually a good portion of it, the majority of it's outside the urban service area.
Okay. Those were my questions. I still think we need to pursue it, though, to see how it could possibly fit. It's going to be limited where it's going to be possible. But, and again, I have all the concerns about the infrastructure as far as access, septic systems, existing septic systems, unless it was a 2-lot parcel, it's going to be problems. There'll be problems trying to affect something like this, but I'm willing to look into it because the need is so enormous. So, thank you, sir.
Commissioner Deutsch?
Yeah, the list of things is going to be unique. You didn't mention parking, too. I mean, parking is going to be an issue. You're going to have water. You're going to have septic. Will the electric company let you have 2 individual services to a single-family lot? I mean, there's a lot of questions, and a lot of research has to be done to look at it. And then again, if we're going to say, hey, we're going to allow, we're going to permit, we're going to let people rent out, not just an in-law, because in-law is pretty easy to do, an additional accessory building on the property, we still have to deal with the items I mentioned before. What do you want to do about the tents, the trailers, the mobile homes, the boats, and the pickup trucks that people are living in right now? And I think those are some of the questions that we've got to tackle. We know it's there. Every one of us knows where something like that exists somewhere in the county. Do we want to make it legal and legit, realizing we've got a housing crisis? How do we want to deal with it? I think those are the questions that we've got to get down to the nuts and bolts and find out what direction we want to take and where we want to go to try and accept this challenge.
I'll be quite honest, we get phone calls on a daily basis of people asking if they could put their RV and live in their RV on their lot. We get just as many a day of code enforcement violations of that guy's living in an RV on his lot or a boat. We've had them actually, a boat on land, people living in the boat.
And that doesn't count the ones at Walgreens, at Walmarts, at our libraries, and the Franz Ross Park and other places throughout the county. People are living there. And, I'm sure that they're seeing at one point or another, are we turning our head in the other direction? Are we accepting it? Or are we concerned about hygiene? Are we concerned about public health? Are we concerned about safety? We've got to address all these issues. There's a lot to this.
That is up to the board's discretion on how you would like us to move forward.
So Sean, I need to ask a few questions before we wrap up here. There are areas in our county where we have multifamily lots platted, ready to go. And before I get down that road, in Sarasota County, they have now said that if you're doing multifamily and it is 750 square feet or less per unit, they're only counting it as half of a density unit.
I was not aware of that. I'd be happy.
It's relatively new, and so my question is that something that we could look at here? Because say you've got an RMF 10 lot, and it qualifies for 2.5 units. Can't put 3 on it, but if it was 750 or more, could you put a triplex now on that unit, considering it half and limiting it? Because we can always limit that they can't do any more than that, but is that an avenue by which we might be able to solve some problems?
That is very creative. I'd be more than happy to look into that. I know a lot of
I got more ideas. Right. We can talk.
Yeah, we've got RMF 15 quarter-acre lots in various areas.
Yeah, not many of those, though.
No, but there are some down in the Rotunda Villas and Meadows, I believe, which you're not getting more than 2 units on a quarter-acre lot, maybe 3 really small ones. But yeah, we've got quarter-acre, multifamily, 12.
I got some samples I can bring in to show you, because I've been looking at trying to help figure out this problem. And the only way I can figure it out is by alternate construction means and trying to get a little bit more density on these properties. It is going to be important that we do think way out of the box, and we may have to limit the areas in which we do this. The other challenging part is some of the properties I'm identifying, they're all septic. So that's going to limit you as to what you can do down the road as well.
We are seeing some alternative construction method properties. Actually, I just saw for the first time, it's over off of Nettle in El Jobin, a container home. It's elevated, it's a couple of stories, but it's constructed out of shipping containers. Under the code, we do not have any primary residence development standards or design standards. I believe that was actually in this most recent legislation. You're not allowed to enact any. So those do make it more affordable. They meet Florida building code, and they can be built on any quarter-acre single-family lot. So we are seeing some of those popping up throughout the county.
They do if you don't do much to them. They can be more affordable, but they take a lot of work to modify. A lot of work. If you're doing it yourself.
They used to be an affordable option.
Yes. Well, I'm not saying that they're not. It just depends on how far you take them. Commissioner DeSalle?
You know, you mentioned the half unit, Commissioner. Brought me back because I was thinking, where did I hear that before? It was after I got elected back in 2016 or 17. I got a letter from a constituent. He had his family had built a condo project, and they had an extra unit, but we don't round up when you have half a unit. No. You don't get rounded up. So we had to convert a livable unit into a storage room because he could not get the approval from the county because they don't round up the half a unit.
Yeah.
And to me, essentially because of that, we took a unit off the market. You know, and I went to staff, well, how can this be? How come they can't get the unit done? It doesn't make sense. We just don't round up. That's just the way it is. You know, everything else, you know, we used to rounding up. You hit half and, all right, we'll round it up. But not for units. And I guess that makes sense because, you know, you can get a whole unit squeezed in on a lot that maybe it's too dense at that point. But when it came to multifamily, that didn't really make sense to me. Why not, for certain situations, allow the code to round up for multifamily? So it just stuck to me when you mentioned the half a unit thing. It came right back to him. Like, that upset me because I had to tell, like, look, there's nothing I can do for you. It has to stay a storage room or whatever he converted it to. You may remember that.
I do, and yeah, that was from the first iterations of the TDR program. Density is the cornerstone of everything in our comp plan and land development regulations. We're hamstrung. Every other community could just say, yep, go ahead, you got whatever units you want, go forth and build, as long as you meet, you know, height restrictions, whatever. We're hamstrung. We were dealt the hand that if you got it in poker, you'd look at it and immediately fold. But we can't fold, so we're trying to be creative.
We're still playing the hand we've been dealt, right?
We sure are.
Do the best we can.
We keep calling, but we're here.
Very good. Anybody have anything else on this?
Hector, do you know where we're going with this? Okay.
I was going to look to Joe for that. All right. Thank you. Thank everybody that gave presentations. We'll go to comments, but before I do that, Carrie, can you stick around for a few minutes? Thank you. All right. Mr. Flores.
None today, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ms. Tetral?
Another thing, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Deutsch? No? Commissioner DeSalle?
Nothing, sir.
Commissioner Doherty?
I'll wait till next Tuesday, sir.
All right. I do have something that I need to bring up today because I got notice during this meeting that Commissioner Frank Mann passed away this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. If I would have known it sooner, I would have done a moment of silence before we started. But just keep his family in your thoughts and prayers. And he was a good adversary at times, and he was also a good ally. He was a great man who I think stood on principle. And I know he's going to be gravely missed in Lee County. And for those of us that knew him, I'm sure we're all going to miss him as well. So with that, we will part today. Our business is done, and everybody have a good week.